Yes, okay. I'm surrounded by microphones, like I'm important. Okay. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Ms. Johnson.
Andrew Benson. Here. Doug Day.
Here.
Bronwyn Wilsey. Here. Joseph Wetmore. No Joseph.
Negative.
Okay.
Hold on, he's being admitted right now. Hold on.
You can say it now.
Joseph Wetmore.
Here.
Edward Levine.
Here. Okay, first item, actually it's number 4 in our packet. The first item of this presentation is from Dave Herrick, the town engineer, about the old highway building roof. Give you a little bit of background here. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Is that this was something that we hope to accomplish next year. The same thing with the old schoolhouse.
Yes.
The old schoolhouse also was an item for next year with the shake shingles, and also to look into the community center roof also. So those 3 were intended to be a package together. Unfortunately, Mother Nature had different ideas. So that roof with the old highway building, which is the one next to Scoops, is now in need of repair. The town has done some repairs so far. And now we're looking to do something hopefully this year or as soon as possible, as opposed to next year. I've asked Guy and also Guy Crow and Dave Herrick to research this type of structure, because when you go through municipalities, it gets a little tricky sometimes. And that's why we have Dave here tonight to share some of that research with us. So Dave, I'll give you the floor, so to speak, and you can guide us through this now. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for letting me jump ahead on the agenda tonight. I've got another meeting shortly after 8 o'clock. So I'll try to be succinct here, and please interrupt me if either you can't hear me or understand where I'm going. But as Ed summarized quite well, 3 potential roofing projects. These came up earlier this summer, and I've had an opportunity to visit the buildings, both with Pat, with Doug, and also a commercial metal roofing contractor who has provided me with a quote for the Old Town Barn up at the corner of Auburn Road. And I just want to share with you quickly what would be involved focusing on the Old Town Barn, given that structure has historically had some leaking issues. And just to help you maybe make some decisions about the character of the roofing that might want to be entertained for that building, but the other 2 as well, the schoolhouse and the community center, which we expect to dig into more later on this fall. But so the town highway barn, roughly 4,500 square feet of asphalt shingled roof now, again, had some leaking problems. Metal roofing, and there's a couple of types of metal roofing. Everyone's very familiar with standing seam. That's the most expensive metal roofing product. What's currently on the Historical Association building that I guess was in town, installed by the town previously, that's called an exposed fastener panel roof system, which is not as expensive as a standing seam product. And so it's an in-between between standing seam and typical asphalt shingles. After the contractor took a look, came down, went into the building, sized it up. He's very comfortable that if the town wanted to go with an exposed fastener metal roof, that could be done for somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000. That is probably a third more to a half more than what you might pay for re-shingling with asphalt shingles. So I think for your consideration, if you want to press ahead with the town barn roof, the old town barn roof replacement, we can put out a bidding document within the next week for that exposed fastener metal roof system and get some pricing back to the town board at the earliest opportunity, so you could make a decision on going with that, which would be a much longer lasting. Obviously, I think it's more attractive. It's applicable for that kind of building, for that type of metal roof. And you could decide if you wanted to, based on formal bids for the metal roofing, go that route, or fall back and just reshingle what's there. And reshingling would be removing what's there and putting in another 25 to 30 year asphalt shingle roof. And again, that probably would be somewhere between $30,000, $32,000, $34,000. So at this point, working with Guy, I've got some documents together that could be, as I said, finished up within the next week, and with your blessing, put out on the street to get you pricing on that exposed fastener metal roof system for that particular building. And I understand that the schoolhouse building, while that may have been considered for a metal roof replacement, the preference locally is to stay with the cedar shakes. So that would be a little different animal. We'd have to get some other people who are in that line of work to come in and provide the town with some good pricing on that. So the approach with the old town barn, again, we can put a bid package together, get pricing, and Guy can correct me if I'm wrong, but we could concurrently get bona fide quotes from asphalt shingle installers at the same time, which in all likelihood would be less than $35,000 limit, which I understand would trigger a public works bidding process. So if you're able to get pricing for both the traditional asphalt shingle and the metal system, then you could make a decision which way to go in order to get something done before the end of the year.
Dal, you want to add anything to this? Before I open it up to the floor for the town board members?
No, I think Dave covered it pretty well. If the cost of the public works project is below $35,000, then it doesn't require public bidding processes. It still would require compliance with the town's procurement policy. It still would be a prevailing wage public works project, because that's if it's $1, it's still public works. And for the sake of argument, this isn't going to come anywhere near the separate bidding requirement for different trades, different primes, what's called Wick's law. So I think the most information, as Dave and I have hashed through the options, is to pursue both avenues so that you can literally compare pencils to pens and understand what are the differences in cost and the long and short-term benefits of metal versus asphalt. And you'll have done both correctly, and you can choose which way to go in the next 5 days notice, next couple weeks, probably. So that would be about it. I think they've covered it.
Any questions for the town board? Okay, Joe?
Wait, I go. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
You can go ahead, Doug, if you want. Go ahead.
What's the lifespan on an exposed fastener roof system, Dave?
It'll be 35 years or more.
And what's the life system on a asphalt roof?
25
35.
tops. What's that?
30. 100. They, they
Was
very,
there a joke? Was there a joke there? I didn't quite catch it.
no, there wasn't, not an intended one.
Oh, okay.
No, the lifespan on asphalt roofs is equal to the exposed fastener metal roof.
Yeah.
Typically. Obviously standing seams above and beyond,
Right, right.
but by and large, more the bang for the buck here, in my opinion, would be the asphalt roof. Because it's the same lifespan. I mean, you're getting unlimited lifetime warranties on shingles. Now that means nothing but a piece of paper, and that may mean nothing on a tin roof where you've got exposed fasteners and neoprene washers holding down the roof. So I think they're in lifespan. I think they're equitable. They're equal. It's easier to put down a metal roof than it is a shingle roof, though. So there's pluses and minuses to both.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
my only comment or comments.
Anything else,
Okay.
Doug? Okay, Joe.
Couple of questions. We're renting that barn out, correct? Is that part of the ice cream shop rental?
Yes, next to the ice cream, next to the Duty Scoops.
Right. And have we talked with the tenants there about how they're going to be impacted by this construction?
They will not really be impacted. Obviously, it's on outside of the building. And the part that they use the most would probably be covered in a day anyway. So it's really not going to impact them unless it happens to rain that day.
Okay. My next question is, what's our long-term plans for that property? Are we planning on keeping that building in the long term, or are we thinking of at some point tearing it down or doing something different?
So right now, this is all subject to change. The discussion was that when the Curset Landscaping, I believe, lease expired, which is what, at the end of this year?
Next year, I believe.
Next year, that would be it, but he has shown some more interest to keep renting. Now, if at one time it was thought to perhaps put more storage there for the rec department, amongst other things. So there's a variety of different things that can be done there. And of course, if the new highway department building is constructed, that may just take all those concerns away, and we may use it for something else if the taxpayers want to fund a new highway department building. So this is all subject to change. There have been different scenarios discussed, and once again, it will be with board approval to see which way it goes. And there might be other ideas out there that haven't been explored yet. So for right now, it's to fix what's there to make it functional, and when the tenant gets close to the expiration of their lease, we'll have that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Brown.
I noticed, Dave, you didn't mention kind of the pricing on the standing seam, and it has a much longer life. Are you not suggesting that because of price prohibitive, or is it just not a good solution for another reason?
My contractor explained to me that the standing seam metal roof, which requires a different substrate system,
Okay.
would be several times the cost of the exposed fastener.
Okay.
Yeah, which would be probably more than the value of the building.
Right. And that brings me directly to my next question, which is, how's the rest of the building? Like, is it in fairly decent shape? I haven't been in that building yet. So how is it?
It's Dave, do you want to speak to that, or
I can speak, but
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead?
it's good enough to, it's the building is sturdy and good enough for the situation it's doing right now.
Okay. I mean, sturdy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not gonna fall down tomorrow.
Right. We don't want to put a,
Day after, but not tomorrow.
all right.
But no, it's in good enough shape, and there's good enough reason to put a roof on it.
My understanding is that there may have to be some structural, some structural corrections, so to speak, replacements, reinforcements, so to speak, for the roof, but that's all part of the package. The other concern I have, which I think,
Not necessarily unless it's stated in a quote or a bid.
Yeah, the expectation was that there's a little shed roof off the north end of the building,
Correct.
and there's a gutter on the very north end of it. And you can see that there's been ice buildup and water penetration, obviously beneath the shingles down through some of the planking. And I had anticipated that there would be the potential for some replacement of the planks at that north edge of the shed roof, just to provide a little extra in the event that when they're out there working on it, that if we have to put down some new planks, we have it in the cost of the project.
That I would suggest, and I'm not trying to step on toes here, would be something as it's torn off and figured out there's a structural issue or plywood that needs to be put down, or perhaps even new framing that needs to be bolstered, so to speak, maybe a cost plus situation. I don't know that we could put a limit on it, but like you said, Dave, that's a good point. I think the rest of the roof looks pretty good other than that point.
Yes.
So I think it's a cost plus situation in that regard.
Yeah.
Joe.
Joe,
Yeah, I got a quick question, question for Guy on this. Typical roofing jobs, they always have some kind of rider in which, once they tear the roof off and they see that this beam needs replacing and that needs replacing, that they add those on. How would this work for the town? Because you don't want them to just say, imagine the worst case scenario and bid for that. You want to give some kind of room for they open it up and discover more work needs to be done. How would that work?
Well, it depends on the structure of the contract or the structure of the bid. But normally one solution is to have an allowance for unanticipated things that happen and they account for it. Another is to have a set rate based on how many 4x8 they have to put down. And another is to make it a not to exceed contract and let them do a more thorough inspection and assume some of that risk. There are other solutions out there, but those are sort of the three that make the most sense. And Doug has probably seen others in the construction world, but normally the one that is usually in municipal is you have them bid or submit a cost, what they would charge. And usually it's done, based on area. And usually it's a 4x8 measurement because normally that's the plywood that's on the roof. So if they have to replace two pieces, there's a set price for that, soup to nuts, all parts, all installation, all removal, all disposal included.
Well, there could be some structural damage too.
Right. I mean, if you're getting
but that still goes to a cost plus situation.
Right. If you're getting into truss repair, yeah. If you're getting into truss repair, then you just have to you'd have to do a change order to account for it or reassess whether there's a different solution other than merely roofing.
So I feel comfortable with that scenario. I don't think there's much to it other than that part Dave described, be honest.
Yeah. And my expectation was that we could, I planned on putting in a supplemental unit price for removal of the shingles on an initial assumption of the square footage, which would be, as Guy suggests, kind of the geometric, practical geometric area calculation. Strip the shingles, add any sister boards that may be needed to the rafters. And then put down ice shield probably on the edge and then put the metal roof on that. So that could be provided to the town as a supplemental unit price if it came to that.
So Andrea has a comment, so let's give her a chance also, okay? Go ahead, Andrea.
Well, this is going to the third building you were talking about. Which historical school building are you talking about? The one next to right here?
Right here, right next door.
Right. And what
I'm
happened?
having trouble hearing you, Andrea. Can you speak closer to the mic, please?
Yep, I'm right up at the mic. What happened to the little historic schoolhouse, the one that's right next to the town hall, right?
It's got cedar shakes on it, and they are leaking. They've kind of warped and peeled, and they've seen better days.
Okay, they aren't the original.
No, that they're not original, I'm sure, but I don't know when those got put on. Sometime probably when that schoolhouse was moved there, I would guess, which was 20 years ago, 20-ish.
Okay, just wondering about the third building. Thank you.
Yeah, that's hopefully a next year project, but that's in the works. So moving forward, the next procedure is if the board is in favor of pursuing this project, Guy or Dave, what's the next steps?
Well, if we wanted to formalize the request for bids for the metal system I described, we can do that. And I think as both Guy and I have suggested, you could concurrently get bona fide quotes from roofing contractors for the asphalt shingle system. And then you'll be able to decide based on cost and maybe other factors that you as a board need to think about in terms of longevity and future use of the building. You can decide which way to go with a final selection.
So what actions do we have to, or could we take tonight if we're all in agreement that this is the way to go?
We could pursue bids on this. Bids on this roof with the specific, obviously the specifications that Dave talked about earlier. Figure out a bid. And I mean, we're at 4,500 square feet. My own feeling on that is any more than I may be living in the past, but I mean, that's not, I can't see it being more than $35,000, if that, and a shingle roof. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and if people are at $1,000 a square, that's pretty high as I would see it, especially with the cost of shingles at this point. So that's my own thought. Someone can correct me if they would like.
Joe, go ahead.
I think there's nothing lost in getting bids at this point, since we don't have to take any of them if we don't like their prices. This, I assume, is coming out of the fund balance. I don't think we've budgeted for this at all.
Well, we have $106,564.66 in repair reserve fund. If you want to pull it out of reserve.
Can we pull it out of the reserve without going to a public referendum?
Yes.
You're gonna have to wait 30 days. Because if you're gonna use reserve funds, you're gonna wait 30 days for the pushback. And
Why would we do that?
we have enough in our account that we can cover this.
Just checking.
Now going into reserve funds, so that might be the best way to go. For that,
And maybe take some for the reserve fund for next year to do the other roof.
if the board decides to go that route, so be it. If
The other
board
roof.
decides to get it out in fund balance that we can cover without touching the reserves, we can do that also. When we close the books in probably February or March, we'll have a much better idea where we stand with our fund balance, and we can have that discussion then. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm all for getting bids right now. I think we should move forward on that.
So do we need a motion here, Guy, or is it just, we just send it out, right? We just send it out and I guess under your guidance. And also your guidance, David, as far as what the language should be, is that something we can just move that forward and charge you with that task? And then we would decide, I guess, I know we have a working meeting in 2 weeks, make a decision then, or we can always do it at our next meeting, which would be in October. Your opinion on that, Dave, first, and I'll ask guys.
Well, if there's the green light to go ahead and advertise and get bidding documents on the street, the assumption would be that they would be received and available for the town to take action on in October.
Fine by me.
Go ahead, Doug.
He said, fine.
I said it was fine by me. That's the way.
Let's move
Get it
forward
done.
on this. Go ahead, Doug.
Let's get it done.
Okay,
Get it done. Okay.
all right.
This discussion's a lot longer than a roof discussion should be, by the way. Just so you know.
Well, I apologize for that. It's all my fault.
Not you, it's not your fault. My fault, I guess, but that's fine.
No. Good.
So on that note, we'll move to item 5 then. So thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, talk to you later.
Thank you, Dave. So item 5 in your packet, privilege of the floor, limit 20 minutes with a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker. I have one so far, and that is Steve Raw. Steve, would you like to come forward?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you all hear Steve? Yes? Ish?
Maybe. pull
Okay, a
the
little
mic
closer to the
closer.
microphone, Steve. Maybe, yeah.
Now, is this
I
good?
practically.
Yeah, you chew on it.
Okay. I wanted to read 2 documents that I sent to the town board and planning board on Monday. The first is a letter, and the second is an attachment to the letter. To Lansing Town Board and Planning Board. We heard there was a complaint about noise at the soccer facility at 320 Blueville Road on August 14, 2021. We listened to the complaint at the board meeting online and subsequently called the sheriff's department for more information. We were told we had to file a FOIL to get details about the complaint. I also talked to the soccer facility manager, and he had allowed a birthday celebration to be held on that Saturday night at the clubhouse. I also called 2 closer neighbors on Van Osten Road. One was home that night and did not hear anything. The other heard the party and was not bothered by it. Attached is the sheriff's report, which we received on September 13th. As you can see on page 7, the first complaint was at 8:38 p.m. and the third complaint was at 11 p.m. The findings by the sheriff deputies do not seem to support the caller's claims. I want to respect the neighbors and their right to reasonable noise levels. I was not present at the facility at the time and can only go by the sheriff's report. Is there anything more that town would like me to do at this point? And then I want to read the page 7 of the sheriff's report, which is really the bulk of the report. And it's the officer report. And it says on August 14th, 2021 at approximately 20:38 hours, I responded to 320 Blueville Road in the town of Lansing for a noise complaint. Loud music was reported at the location with a very loud bass. Upon my arrival in the area, the sound was almost unnoticeable. It was also not even dark out yet. And the music was coming from a soccer club that was approximately 200 yards from the roadway. I contacted the complainant and advised them that the noise was low and more than fair, and that the music was not an enforceable issue. I advised her to express her concerns over the noise with the soccer club at a later date. The complainant later called back and reported that the music was loud again and she could not deal with it anymore. Deputy Shipman and I responded back out, and the music was so low that it could not be heard from the parking lot within 20 yards of the music source. Again, this was not an issue and there was nothing law enforcement could do to address the issue. The soccer club was notified of the complaint and they stated that they would continue to keep the music low. Deputy Street was then dispatched again for the same complaint around 2300 hours. Upon his arrival, the last attendants of the party were leaving the soccer club. My time up?
Yeah, that's the 3 minute.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
I will tell you, Steve, that just as a side note, I did receive your email with both of those attachments, and I did forward them all to the town board the beginning of this week,
good. Thank you.
just so you know that.
I just wanted to get it on record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Now, does anybody else want to exercise privilege of the floor at this time? No one here? CJ, do you see anyone indicating they want privilege of the floor?
Nope, no one in the waiting room.
Okay, let's move on then. Item 6 in our packet is the Lansing Community Library report. I'm wondering how the week is happening in the bees.
I think the views have been solid, and I'm not sure of the lead on meeting with Susie on Friday. But I know they have someone coming in.
I'm really having trouble hearing you, Andre. Is your mic not on or something?
It is
It is.
on, but it's,
It's on, but it's hard to talk backwards, but I'll do it.
All right, thank you.
There's nothing significant, the library board, it's fine.
Okay. Item 7 in your packet is the Lansing Youth Service report.
That one too is good, and lots of kids were served this summer, which is wonderful. They were afraid kids would not sign up, and they did.
So they have a lot of response.
Yes. and good response.
Excellent. Item 8 is Mike Sigler's report. We have item 9, which is Park and Rec. Pat Terrell.
just a couple things I'll mention off of my report. Tomorrow is the last concert in our series, which is one that was rescheduled. It is Smoking Loons tomorrow night, starting a little bit early at 6 o'clock, just due to darkness. And also Friday night, 7 p.m. is the Veterans Watchfire at the park. It's a very nice event for the veterans. Please try to attend if you can. And we did have a little bit of storm damage today. We had a couple of limbs down at the park that were rather large.
Patrick, what time is the Veterans Watch on Friday?
7 p.m.
That's this week, right? This Friday?
Yes, this Friday.
So I have a compliment for your crew. Thank you for cleaning the eaves at the pavilion.
Yes.
And I understand it's not one of the first projects you do, because you've been scrambling with, let's see, rain damage, all the debris that's washed up on the shore, which I guess is part of the fuel for the watch fire, right?
It will be, yes.
It will be, amongst others. And the bulkhead project hopefully will start soon.
Well, not till after November 15th.
Excellent.
Yes.
Which will be here before we know it. And looks like everyone wants to go down to the parks and the numbers and wants to camp and use the pavilions and the boat slips and
Yes,
all that good stuff.
we did very well on numbers this year.
Good. So does anyone from the town board have any questions for Pat? That's always a good sign. Okay, thanks. Thank you for also being here along with CJ to navigate us through this.
No problem.
Highway report from our highway superintendent, Mike Mosley. And how was your first week?
I
Busy as always.
Yes.
Any storm damage on Salmon Creek that you know
No, we're still cleaning up from the last. Everybody hear me?
of? Yes. Can anyone hear Mike?
Everybody good?
Yes? Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Speak right into the microphone.
Yeah. How's that? Pretty good? Can you hear me now?
Everybody but Joe. Okay.
All right, so we cleaned up from the flood damage from the 300 block. You can read my report there. Like I said, a special thank you to the Benson family. Without them, we definitely couldn't have done that project.
You're welcome.
Short notice and let us get right in and get the work done. The road would have been in not a good situation as the guardrail was already tipping. Angel from Soul and Water is a godsend. Love working with her. Knowledgeable, helpful. We're working on, let's see, repairing down by Jeff Cook's starting next week. Working on it, adding more rock back in when that pretty much got gutted from 2 years ago. Hopefully within a week we can have that repaired. Shoulders went down. I didn't have time to put that in, but we got shoulders down on a couple of the roads that got paved today before the rain. And we're moving to close off and be done with the restoration of CWD 5, hopefully, in between the rain showers. We got some trees to plant and a valve to cut in. We need to work with Dave Herrick on the 8-inch valve that we need to cut in. And that will allow, when there's a main break near crossroads, for us to then isolate that break and make sure that the boys' prison has water. Boys' school. Other than that, fall is here, it seems.
So any questions from the town board for our highway superintendent, Mike Mosley?
I do. Hey, Mike, I was wondering, I know there was an email circulated months ago now talking about the concept of using brine on the roads rather than salt directly. And it's environmental impacts. I'm wondering if that ever got to you. I know it's your first official week on the job. So wondering if you've had a chance to look at that and what your thoughts are. And if the answer is no, I can resend it to you. I can find it and resend it.
Yeah, that would be great. Right at this point in time, we have no way, no capacity.
Right.
To spray brine. That would be pretty costly undertaking. It's something if the board would want to spend the money, we could absolutely look into.
Right. Yeah, that was my understanding, was that it would be different equipment, and it's sort of like, is that something we want to move towards? And would it make sense? So I'll resend you what I have about it, but it's definitely for the lay person. But
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Good. Go home. Only about a 14-hour day today.
Long.
Anyways, thank you, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Next item in the packet is CJ, Director of Planning. CJ, you have the helm. Go ahead.
Hey everybody. So you should have received a report from me outlining some of the broader pieces of work that we've been doing over the last month, which is quite a bit. Getting our new staff up and running has been a lot of fun, very exciting, and pretty vertical learning curve kind of for all of us. But in any event, one thing I did want to mention, and I think I just touched on it on the report, was that we are looking into some cloud-based software. Our current software is starting to sunset and not being supported anymore. And so we've reached out to some folks in the community and local governments that we know, and we're very fortunate to have in the town of Ithaca, the director of codes there is Marty Mosley, and he's been just an incredible source of information for us. And he suggested and has done a lot of background research, saved us from that. They talked to at least 8 different providers, helped narrow it down to 3. And so we're looking at some cloud-based software options, essentially making it easier to do business with government, both with our department and any others. We're primarily trying to connect better with public works, so highway, who's I affectionately think of as public works since they do so much. They do obviously water and sewer. They help us with drainage districts and stormwater, and then of course highways. So they have quite a large role, obviously, in the town, and we'd like to do as much as we can to provide citizen services that are secure, able for any of the staff to access remotely, and provide cost savings to taxpayers, actually, by increasing efficiency and are future-proofed, easy to use for everyone. So we're looking at a few different options. I'm hoping to have some numbers for you soon. I'm hoping at the next meeting we should have at least maybe a paragraph or two with some bullet points and a budget for how much this would cost. The initial setups are usually the most for like a data migration from our existing software. But then once we get up and running, we'd really love something that was cloud-based, so we can work remotely. Really, anyone can work remotely, and then constituents also have the opportunity to engage with government in a way I think they're becoming more comfortable, well, that most people frankly expect this day and age. So in any event, that's been a significant undertaking, and we're really been kind of slowly chipping away at it and learning more. And so we'll have some more information on that for you soon. And if you have any specific questions about the report, I am happy to answer.
Any of the town board members? Okay, let's move on. Thank you, CJ. So we're going to move on, engineers report, ag report. I guess now we go to item 14, which is the town clerk presents the tentative 2022 town of Lansing budget.
Okay.
And you also we can also have a little bit of a, if you want me to give you some highlights, you can, or I'll just let you read it. You can ask questions that are meeting in 2 weeks, however you want to do this. But I'd like to give you a few highlights after Mrs. Munson has spoken.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
You're good.
Okay, so this is just formality. Every year I present the tentative budget. So this is the tentative budget for fiscal year 2022 for the town of Lansing, and I'm presenting this to the town board. Copies are in everyone's mailboxes. I don't know if you've received them yet, but they are there. And they will be emailed to you from the supervisor / bookkeeper office tomorrow, I believe. I did write down a little bit of the timeline. I don't know, Ed, do you want me to go over that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so what happens now that you have the tentative budget is the town board reviews, modifies, and puts changes in writing. And that will be done at the town board budget meeting, which is September 29th. So I believe that's 2 weeks from tonight. Then at the town board meeting on October 20th, we'll have a resolution to approve the changes. And the tentative budget moves to a preliminary budget. Then on the meeting, and also we set a public hearing. So on November 3rd, the town board meeting, we have a budget public hearing and then the final budget approval.
Anything else?
That's the end of my spiel.
Okay.
Great
so,
job.
This is all subject to change. This is also to for board approval. The way that the budget looks right now, it looks like a 5-cent increase over last year. And we are going to use some fund balance and put that in perspective for you. And it looks like this year, the right one, this year from the A fund, it'll be $200,000 and the DA fund will be $110,000. So that's $310,000. Now, last year we used $118,500. And we feel comfortable we can still do that and maintain our fund balance amounts to be healthy, which they are. When I did the calculations last year, they're about 5.4 months of fund balance surplus, but we'll see what happens this year. For the B and the DB, which is our sales tax revenue stream, we're going to need about nothing out of the B. And a large part of that has to do with increased fees, even though we've taken on another planner. The DB will use $333,829. These are all in second page of your book here. As a perspective, last year, the B was $62,823, DB $251,906. So that was roughly 313. So roughly it is $20,000 more than last year. Now keep in mind also all these different dynamics. We're looking for our sales tax revenue, if we for the last 5 months maintain the same amount as we did last year, which was under siege, there'll be a $200,000 surplus in itself. And we're doing the 80-20 plan where 80% of that goes to the highway, 20% goes to planning. There's a variety of other things that are going to come in at the end of the year, which we don't know about. So this is once again, just a very tentative budget for now, for people to look at. And whatever they decide, you also have your spreadsheets here of the 5 years. You can see where the expenses are. You can see which ones went up, which ones went down. And personally, due to all the dynamics that are going on in the town, in the area, we're in fantastic financial shape, in my opinion. And then it comes up to the board members to sensitize everyone on the board to what your concerns are, what things need to be addressed. We still have the ARPA money that we can move forward if we want to. I would strongly urge the board to consider the $200,000 that the highway department sacrificed last year in advance. They have a lot of stone and oil. This is something Mike Mosley can give you an idea of what next year, but there's very little paving done this year. But stone and oil, a lot of times it's like putting, for us old timers, when you used to put fluoride on a tooth, same type of thing. It protects it, so that it doesn't decay. As we all know, when the road erodes, especially after that covering, it can just wash out quickly. So he can address that more clearly, either, like I said, down the road, because that's not essential for us to discuss now. But the ARPA money, the $407,000, I think is actually more than that now, because it's sitting there collecting interest. Now we're up to $409,639, and we'll get another tranche of that money next year. So those are just food for thoughts. And like I said, a lot to digest, but those are just the highlights. It's roughly, I think it's a 3.2% increase in taxes. That's with, I think, the assessments going up an average of 3.9%. And it is above the tax cap by $62,000. But we all voted to be able to override that because there are no better stewards of the town than the town's elected officials, in my opinion. So we can move forward. I don't have I can try to answer some questions tonight, or we can wait until the 29th. I strongly urge you to reach out to the different department heads if you have questions from their departments privately. They have questions. And also, if you want to reach out to me or Charmaine or Mary Ellen, feel free to do that also. Okay? This is an open forum back and forth before the 29th. You don't have to wait for that. Joe.
I just want to clarify the timeline a little bit. You would like all of our major suggestions by the 29th of this month, but there's still time to affect changes all the way up until we actually adopt the budget, correct?
Yeah, there is actually. Let's see if I can find my timeline here also. And these timelines also are in our magazines that they send us every year to do that. What Mrs. Munson gave, she gave you a timeline. This isn't Talk of the Towns that they give out every year. And Mrs. Munson gave you one for us that we want to adopt. But yes, we can go up until actually before the public hearing. After we have the public hearing, you can make changes also. I mean, so so I think if I read you correctly, you just don't have 2 weeks and that's it. You have more time than that.
Right. When does the state require us to have passed the budget? Is it like the 20th of November, as I remember?
It's interesting this year because the election is early. It varies. But it says here that the budget is adopted by the governing board no later than November 20th. Now, we'd like to do it the first Thursday after election, but if we have to call a special meeting, we can do that. Also, without my calendar in front of me, November 20th is, let's see, it's the 4th. So the 4th would be the 3rd. So we still have a meeting on the 17th of November,
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
Exactly. Correct.
So we could approve it on the 17th and not have to have a special meeting.
If it goes that far and if people still want to discuss it, or if the majority of the board wants to pass it, then they can also, yes.
Right. I just like to give us time after the public hearing for us to listen to whatever the public may say, digest it and decide whether or not we want to make changes based on that.
And it'll be up to the board to decide if they're comfortable moving forward at that time or not.
Mhm.
And we've done it both ways. And we will, like I said, listen intently to their concerns. And we'll also at that time, we'll see if they want to pass it on the 4th. If not, then we can move it to the 17th. Any other questions?
May I ask one question?
Sure.
Just for clarity on something you said. So changes could be made after the public hearing, not up till the public hearing, but after the public hearing. Am I just hearing that correctly?
Well, that's, once again, it's in our magazine here that everyone has. So now it says there's 9 steps. Now it's on number 3. The budget officer files the tentative budget with the town clerk, which was done no later than September 30th, which we have. Item 4, the town clerk presents the tentative budget to the town board, which she just did on or before October 5th, which we have. Item 5, the town board makes revisions and prepares a preliminary budget to be filed with the town clerk prior to the public hearing. Then it becomes preliminary. Then we give the notice of public hearing. At least 5 days shall elapse between the date of the first publication and the date specified by public hearing. Item 7, the public hearing is held on or before the Thursday immediately following the general election. The hearing may be adjourned from day to day, but not beyond November 15th. Item 8, final revision to the preliminary budget are made after public hearing, but prior to adoption. Item 9, the budget is adopted by the governing board, not later than November 20th. And you all have this magazine, so you can look it up on page 5. So there is time. And like I said before, any questions, I urge you to talk to the department heads. You can also talk to me, or you can talk to Charmaine or Mary Ellen, or and go from there. Because sometimes there's changes as you go. I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of these spreadsheets. These 5 years, you see where the trends are. But also, if there's a jump, like there is in equipment this year for the highway, there's a reason why. Or last year they had a small amount. They say they have a large amount because I think this is one of the 10 wheelers this year. But you can see things like that. And ask those questions. And then from there, we can have that discussion. Okay? Okay to move on? Silence is golden. Okay. Now we're on to the consent agenda. So Mrs. Munson, you want to walk me through this again? Because I always seem to drop the ball.
Sure. So we have a very small consent agenda this time. Usually when board member will read, there's only 2 things. So a board member could read the 2 items and then we need a first and a second and we'll do a vote.
I'll move it.
Go ahead.
Wait, we gotta read them.
I was going to have on to read.
I like Doug's rules.
There's 2 of them. Motion authorizing stormwater operating management and reporting agreement for Buda Vista Apartments, SBM rentals. And the second one, approve audit and budget modification and supervisors report. I'll move it, or Doug moves it, I second it.
Any further, well, there's no further discussion, but that's consent agenda. Okay, Mrs. Munson?
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Day,
Yes.
Bronwyn Wilson,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
yes,
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 16, board member reports. Andra?
Library and Lansing Youth, which is one we already, Lansing Youth Services, one we already talked about. I did attend by Zoom the CAC Conservation Advisement Committee, and that was mostly the letter concerning Bell Station. And I was not able to attend the Environmental Management Council. So that's all I have to report.
All right, thank you. Brown?
I was not able to attend ZBA this month or the Quio meeting. But I know the Quio notes have been emailed to everybody. The LACPPF worked on the same Bell Station letter. And then at the meeting, we welcomed a new member who has a ton of on the ground knowledge. He's worked both at Cargill and at the power plant. So it's really great to have somebody who can be like, oh yeah, I remember that place there, and give us a lot of context.
Who's that person?
Heck, Leon something. I apologize. I don't remember. Yeah, it probably will take me more time to find his last name, but
The Harris, yep.
thank you. He's a really great asset to the committee, and the other newish member to the committee slogged through a bunch of foiled DEC documents about the water discharge and everything, and gave a pretty thorough explanation of what's been found. And we realized we need to get the most recent bits that were not part of that information, so that he's going to be looking at and kind of giving us information about. But again, a lot of it was about Bell Station. It was right after our meeting, so a lot of the meeting was just me updating folks about what was happening.
Sure.
And that's all I've got.
Okay, Doug?
I have really nothing other than stuff that was covered in obviously CJ's report. We didn't have a meeting this past Monday or the Monday before because that was Labor Day. So not much other than what CJ put in her report. Several different things at the planning board level. I can go if you would like.
Okay, Joe?
I sent my report around yesterday. Did anybody have any questions on it?
No.
Nope.
Okay, good. So, budget took up a lot of time, individually with all the different department heads on that. Also met with our new highway superintendent a lot, and we meet a lot anyway. Just briefly, he keeps me on board as I do with Pat, as you call them, CJ and all the department heads. Debbie, they all know a lot. 6:30 is a little early for this guy, but I'm struggling. But anyways, and moving forward, the trends are. I mean, I want details, I give details, but the trends are technology. Technology is going to be a biggie moving forward. Filling in the gap from the lack of the Lansing Star with websites, accurate websites where we have two people do it in-house. Dan Beard did an excellent job, and he's retired, so we do it in-house so that we can update the information out there as fast as we can to fill the void with the truth as opposed to rumors or anything else that comes out. And we have a lot moving around in Lansing right now. So the best thing for us to do is try to get that accurate information out there as soon as possible. So that's the other thing we're looking at. Also looking at the employee handbook to adjust that. We have department head meetings first of the month. Also looking at updating the COVID policy. Sometimes it's like playing whack-a-mole with that because it seems to be moving all the time. We don't know where the next steps are with that. There will be a vaccination clinic here this Saturday. And you can thank Valerie McMillan for spearheading that. And also Pat Terrell. Yes, they did reach out to me, but most of the heavy lifting was done by them. So they get the atta girl and the atta boy. Yeah, excellent job as far as that goes. And we still stress that if you haven't been vaccinated, please consider it. Any questions, ask your health provider for guidance, and hopefully we can contain the virus. What else as far as that goes? We have some things to talk about in executive session, but overall, once again, as I briefly said in the budget, we're in good shape as we move forward. We're transitioning our employees again, as we did at the highway department. Some of those may be retiring soon. We have a couple of positions that will be opening. Right now, I think we're 2 people short, and Mike Mosley will post that job soon, and then we consider the applicants and go from there. A lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and we try to stay in front of it. And we are blessed to have an excellent, excellent group of employees. And they always seem to be challenged and they shine. So we're very fortunate to have them. That's all I have now. Does everyone want to take a break first, or do you want to jump into the work session? Joe.
I just had a quick question because you brought up the Lansing Star, and we all missed the fact that that was a weekly newsletter that was dedicated to town issues. But what we've also lost is all the back issues, because that's gone dead. So you can't look up our history. And there was a ton of work done there. And I've reached out to Dan, and he still has all that as a file. So it's not gone, but it's unavailable to the public. And I was wondering if the board was interested at all of hosting that somewhere on the town website so people could have all that historical information available to them again.
Absolutely.
So, you know, yes, it's a great suggestion, but is that his material?
He's open to this. I've already reached out to him and talked to him about it, and he'd love to see it available again. He just didn't want to keep paying the fees to keep his website up.
So that's something we can discuss with Dan. So I don't know, Patrick, if you want to reach out to him.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, that'd be excellent. For the archives, at least we'll have a history there.
Mhm.
And forward from there. So that was a good suggestion. Anyone else? Shall we take a break, or you want to go to work session? Okay, work session. Anybody else want to go work session? Looks like everybody else doesn't have to go to the bathroom. Okay, wonderful.
But I'll be quick.
What's up?
I'm going real quick. I'll be right back.
All right.
I thought he just telling you to be quick.
Good night, Steve.
Bye, Steve.
Yeah, stay well. So we'll start on the first subject, and we can circle back. There won't be anything that Doug will miss. The first one is the mandatory training. This is something I've had our new, I guess you call HR person, Mary Ellen Albrecht, work on. She has taken over the duties of the HR slot, since we really didn't have an official one. And one of the concerns we have is for committee members to do their training. And I think she sent out an email to everyone. You should have it. Also, there's a hard copy in your box. But anyways, this is something that I think we need to move forward on. We're talking about the mandatory training, Doug, as far as the committee members go.
Yep.
And we want to move this. First of all, to put a deadline on this, which I would think would be October 31st to have this done. Otherwise, it drags on. And then put one on for next year also. We don't want to be in the same situation. So I don't know, this is something we can agree on tonight to move forward on so that she can send it out to all the different department heads to share with their committee members. But we need to have something done sooner than later on this.
Do it. No
I
question.
like the idea that people can come here and do it sort of together. I think that's a really nice.
Yes, there's options. There's many options to this, and it's not, yes, it's not just waiting for someone to show up here, and if you're not scheduled that day, you have to wait 3 months. Anybody else have thoughts about this? Go ahead, Brahman.
Just clarification, this is the workplace violence harassment training. Is that correct?
And sexual.
Yes.
Yes.
Sexual harassment.
Right. And this is the one that if you've done it for another organization or another committee or your employer, you just need to submit that information to the town.
Documentation that has
Right.
been done. From personal experience,
Great.
I've done it myself. I think
Yeah.
other people have done that. Yes, they don't have to do this one. They already have one that is equivalent. We need that certificate or whatever that you print out to give your HR person a different job. Yes. absolutely.
That was my understanding. And I've clarified that for a handful of people recently. So I wonder if when we do put out the information, like leading with that, because I think a lot of people probably have already done it for someone else. And so leading with like, if you've done this, just send us the information and we may catch a lot of people who we don't have the paperwork for.
It would be helpful. Yes.
Would. And so you're asking for our sort of okay to put a deadline on this training for this year? Is that what
Yes.
Mhm. makes sense to me?
We've received this information already, right? The PERMA?
Yes. I mean, and she put it in the language where they're asking, and she spells out, when she looked at, for instance, PESH with employee, it's not just paid employees that, regardless, it says here, employee is defined as a person that is permitted to work for an employer. Hence, this would apply to anyone, regardless of compensation, thus performing work on behalf of the town. Full-time, part-time, temporary, seasonal, volunteers, committee members, et cetera, all considered employees in this context. That's in the email that was sent to you in your hard copy also.
Okay. So since I'm the HR person for my company, can I just say I already did it? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. My own HR guy.
You are an HR guy. Okay.
Yeah.
That's something that we want to put a little bit of teeth in it for our department to say, look at.
No, I have no problem with it. I have no
We're
problem.
asking you to do this. We simply want you to apply. And in all fairness, for all the new committee members, they simply might not be aware of it, but I think they will be aware of it. We have reached out to them in the past, and now it's the point where it comes to, will you, the third time, it's you will. Or not. If not, that's fine. That's your decision, but you won't be on that committee anymore. You can also reapply next year if there's an opening, but I would be hesitant to vote for someone like that unless they comply. Yes, Joe.
I would suggest, given that it's late in the year, that we just say they have till the end of the year to comply. And if they don't comply, we'll replace them in January when we're setting all the committees again. I think it's just a little simpler.
Good. I don't have to do it.
It's clean.
I like that idea, Joe.
That
How's
means,
everyone? I got a yay, I got a yay.
that means
You want it? Go ahead.
Doug's all for it. I think that makes sense.
Got it, Doug. If you don't do it by the 1st of January, you're not on the board anymore. Okay, let's start with that. Not messing around anymore.
I want to thank everyone for the board, being on the board. Oh, that's later. I'm sorry.
No, you still got a couple more. Sorry.
Nope. I didn't take the training.
I wonder if we should also,
Well, by my father, be very respectful. So not to be, he told me to be a wise guy, but yeah, okay, that's fine too.
I wonder if also now just setting the precedent that we don't wait until this far in the year to require people to do it. Maybe if we say, if you don't do it by January, we're going to have to find somebody for next year. And then it seems silly to do it again just a couple months later, but having the deadline be, you know, the 6-month mark rather than coming up against it at the end of next year again.
In the past couple of years, we've had it, the deadline being, August, early August or something like that. So I don't believe it's ever gone this far. Now, not to say that was right or wrong, but I don't believe it's ever gone this far.
So to your point, Rob, perhaps June 30th would be the cutoff point for next year.
Right. And that can just be part of this same information, like, just so you know, you're going to have to do it in a short amount of time. If you haven't done it yet, you're going to have to do it again within 6 months, but then we'll just be on the right cycle of things.
And they would be off for a year at least until the next year. So if someone said, I'm not going to do it this year, that means 2022, they wouldn't be eligible to be on that committee.
Right.
Or any committee.
Or board.
And go
Some
from there.
people might be happy about it.
Yeah, I'm sure they have to get it, right?
I don't know how big a threat that is for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Ed. We appreciate that.
Here, washing your hands right now.
So may we do that? So the language will be to the end of this year. Go ahead, Deb.
Well, I'm just wondering if by law, we're allowed to wait for 6 months into the year before that training can be done, if it has to be done within so many days or whatever, once the year starts. I think once you're hired, you have to do it within a certain number of days. So I just don't know. I think that's something that we would have to check with Mary Ellen on to make sure that you could wait till June 30th.
So let's do this. Let's agree on, which we have, it sounds, that the end of this year, December 31st, will be the cutoff. Now, if Mary Ellen, for some reason, says that's a bad idea, with her experience from the past of the HR, we'll let her respond. But we could always either address this at the working meeting, or we can address this in our October meeting and say, okay, what is this, right? And then I think perhaps moving forward, that would be the first piece to say, where's the cutoff for this year? The next piece we have a little bit more time to work on. Is it July 1st, June 30th, 2022? Should it be sooner than that? Should the language say up to June 30th, or advised by whatever guidance? I'm sure there's verbiage out there that people can work on, but I think for now, we need to get the initial concern addressed. We can probably finalize something at our October meeting to see what next year's cutoff would be and what the language should be. So for right now, I think we'll say December 31st. And if there's a conflict or something we're missing, and that our HR person has more experience to say that's a bad idea or I can live with it, then they can respond probably within the next week. Fair enough? So we're all in agreement with that. Now, do we have to have a motion for that, or is that something that we can just agree on? I don't know what the formality is here in case it's challenged. But we can always address this at our organizational meeting next year also, right? Because we vote on the members. So there's other ways that we can enforce this. But you have it in writing that people know about it. Okay. So I think we're in a good spot. I don't think any additional more action need to be taken at this point. Okay. So roof replacement, we talked about that already. Cannabis, CJ, we have a subcommittee on that. Is there a recommendation yet as far as that goes?
Well, let me just back up just for a moment and just say, I assume you all know about the state's cannabis legislation, which legalizes medical and recreational cannabis consumption. Okay, we're good on that. So the biggest decision, as I understand it from council, is that the town needs to decide whether to opt in or opt out. And this decision needs to be made by, for us, because our last meeting of the year is December 15th, or 2 weeks before that. Sorry, Deb Munson. Let me preface that by saying more like December 1st. So there is kind of a ad hoc working group that was assembled, one town board member who's here tonight, of course, and can speak to this, as well as 3 planning board members who essentially took up the issue. There was one fairly strong opt-out preference stated by one of the members. Another preference was to consider coordinating with the county, which I believe Joe could speak to as a member of Tompkins County Council of Governments. I've also reached out to City of Ithaca to kind of understand a little bit about where they're coming from, since I think they'll probably be a big driving force in the local market relative to this, well, for many reasons, but mostly the agglomeration economy existing on the commons, as it were. And then also with the senior planner and tourism director, Nick Hemholt, because there's some evidence that there's a link between tourism and recreational cannabis, kind of complementary driving forces. So I think what I'd like to understand, if the town board wishes to opt out, there's some revenue implications, the extent of which I'm not really sure. I don't know if anyone really knows what the projections are going to be, because obviously the town would not be able to collect any of the revenue that the village share would be taking in. But the thing about opting out is that you can opt in at any time in the future, but you can only opt out by the end of the year. So it's kind of speak now or forever hold your peace if you're going to opt out. Otherwise, you're in, and happy to answer any additional questions. And I just want to say Guy's firm has also done a lot of great research on this, and we're happy to answer any questions.
I have just a quick point of clarification, CJ. When you say opt in and opt out, it's just talking about selling it within the town boundaries. Is that correct? There's no opting in or out of the legalization of use.
Yes, that's a finer point. And I think actually it's two pieces of the legislation that we would opt out of. I think one of them is related to the retail sale, which that's what we'd be opting out. And then I think it's also on-site consumption. I'm pretty sure, but.
And so on-site consumption, you mean at the place of sale?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
That's correct. And it's possible, you know, I'm just kind of riffing, but it's possible that there could be some locations cited within the village of Lansing, in which case the town would be eligible for a slice of the revenue collected there. Without necessarily hosting per se, or having any licensed establishments within the town.
So I guess getting back to the subcommittee, have they recommended anything yet?
I wouldn't say there was a kind of a unified recommendation. Like I said, there was one very strong recommendation to opt out. There was one for the countywide approach, which I mentioned. I did kind of provide some kind of background commentary on. Obviously, the county doesn't have the land use authority. You know, that's all vested in local government. But we were essentially trying to approach this together to see, you know, what we could do, and there may be some more information from TCOG, but really it seems like there's not a really strong recommendation, but if you'd like, I'm happy to look into this further and kind of draft a, you know, a little bit of a briefing from the planning perspective, but no solid recommendation either way as far as I know. But you know, Joe, feel free if I maybe I'm not characterizing it correctly.
When does this take effect?
So like I said, the town would need to opt out by December 31st. We have to basically, if we don't opt out by then you're in, and that's it. So.
Does the town, if we're in, then does the town have a say in who constructs the little store to sell cannabis, or just, or only the construction of a building and they can do what they want, sell cannabis?
Yeah, so I think Andrew's asking, can the town regulate? And yeah, we can apply very basic, though, zoning regulations related to the to these types of businesses relating to time, place, and manner. So they can't be much like some other uses that have kind of preemption protection. You can't just say, none, within 5,000 feet of a school, in a way that's, perhaps there would be nowhere for them to actually locate in the town. It would be kind of a de facto ban on them. So the restrictions would have to be, reasonable. So.
My understanding is we could regulate them like liquor stores.
Right.
That basically we could tag it on
Or a bar.
to, whatever our rules are on liquor stores, so you can only place them in wherever the liquor store goes. And, it's a similar type use, so it would make sense to do something quite similar to that, which I think is what most of the people at TCOG were talking about doing in their towns. When I brought it up to TCOG, everybody said that they were expecting significant revenue from these stores and they were all going to opt in.
Yeah, but you can always opt in.
You can, but you can't get the past revenue if you opt out, and everybody's looking.
You're talking a month or two.
I don't know how that works. I don't know if you opt in, if you suddenly start getting the revenue stream, or whether you have to wait till the next year. The state's still putting together a lot of these regulations, so it's hard for specific answers to be answered.
Well, personal opinion is that, first of all, is there a sunset on when you can opt in? Is there a sunset when you can opt in? Is it a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Does anybody know that?
You mean if you opt out to start with?
If you opt out to start, is there a deadline when you can only opt back in? So my personal opinion is that let somebody else be the first mouse. We'll be the second mouse, because about second mouse gets the cheese. Let's go see what the results are first, because quite frankly, this isn't really about the money. We'll be okay without the revenue stream for this, if that's the only reason why. Let's see what the other effects are. Let's see how they regulate them. Right. And the other thing is that if we opt out now, it buys us time to where we want to put the allowed use for this in certain areas. If you put it next to the liquor store, you're right down the road from us. If that's where you want to put, if that's your guidance. So I think we have a lot to learn by other people's experiences. I hope they all have good experiences, what they anticipate if their municipalities decide. But I think for right now, my personal opinion is we can be somewhat cautious. Opt out now, and then see where this thing goes, see what the other responses are from people who are doing it. And if it's something that seems to be desirable, we can always opt in.
I agree with that. That's my gut feeling.
That's my feeling. I already stated that, but it's my feeling.
Now, the other thing is that can we also pass it where you have consumption, like there's no smoking on town property? Can you also have there's no consumption on town property of this also? Otherwise,
Yes, that's my understanding.
I believe the state law governs it like tobacco. I believe it says you can use it in the same places you can use tobacco, and therefore not in the same places you can't use tobacco. So that part of it's already covered.
So that's something that's already written in the law, or is that something we'd have to do an addendum to?
I think that's in the state law.
I heard that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
But we'll verify that. I'm sure.
Yeah. Obviously.
I think Guy could probably speak to that better, but I think it like a public health, like Bronwyn's and Doug are saying, like, I think it's if we don't allow smoking on town property, then we just don't allow smoking. It doesn't matter what the smoking is.
Or is it just
Right, but I don't think that would be the same. Would it be the same with all the candies and cookies and stuff that are infused? And, who's going to regulate? You're going to go up to someone and say, what's in that cookie?
Yeah, I understand. That's what the devil is in the details.
That's
Right?
not as blatant, Joe, that's not as blatant as something smoking in next to you.
Well, the difference between smoking is if they're smoking next to me, I have to breathe their air, whereas they're eating their cookie, I don't have to eat part of it too.
Right. That's the difference.
I've had personal experience where brownies were made, left unattended. Younger children thought they were just brownies, and it caused disaster, trips to the hospital. So I am not in favor of any of this, and I want to wait to see if it's worth it. Because that could easily happen. Very, very easily. Anyway.
When
that's
does,
my
the-
2 cents.
when does the next subcommittee meet, CJ? When does the next
There's
advisory?
there's no formal meeting schedule, but what I could do is just kind of give a synopsis of this conversation tonight. Ask them perhaps to maybe solidify their opinion a bit more and offer a more formal recommendation. And so, am I hearing that what you might like to consider at the next meeting is both an opinion from this working group as well as draft opt-out legislation? If I
Well,
Draft
I actually don't, I'm not in favor of opting out. I think that the concerns about that I've heard from people that lead them to want to opt out are ones that wouldn't really be addressed by opting out. You know, the idea of people leaving things out where kids can get to them, or people using in inappropriate spots. People are going to just go next door to the next town over and buy it. So I just am not in favor of opting out. It makes sense to me to go ahead and opt in, and yeah, I guess the end.
Okay, that's good to know. Anyone, Joe? Thumbs up, meaning
I agree
what?
with Bron. I agree with Bronwyn. I think we should not opt out. I don't really see the dangers of having cannabis stores in the town. I think they're all going to be in the village anyway. But yeah, we're dealing with the alcohol sales already, and we all know that there's problems with that. And they're significant. You know, people go to bars and they go off driving afterwards drunk, and you know, we're already dealing with that. So I think the harmful effects are minor at best, and I think the revenue would be valuable to the town. And I don't think, like Bronwyn said, you can regulate the things that are the concerns I'm hearing coming up before this board. People are going to go to the ball games and they're going to have the candy on them. And, you know, hopefully they aren't going to leave it out where the kids can get to it. But Pat's not going to go up and down the ball field saying, what's in that cookie? What's in that candy wrapper?
And I'd also add that sort of just the history of prohibition generally of whatever substance seems to not be particularly effective. I mean, you know, if I think about dry towns across the country, it doesn't mean that people in those towns don't drink. It just means that the town they aren't selling it within the borders. So I just don't see it as an effective strategy, I guess.
So this is not a all or none, right? This is an option to opt in later if you want to. And sometimes it's just a matter of giving some time to see what the impact is first. But we'll have a further discussion on this because we don't have a resolution in front of us right now. And right now, you know, fairness, I think we need some more data, and we have an opportunity to get that data without deciding one way 100% or another way 100% without being having recourse. Now, if we opt in, can we opt out?
No.
That is a concern I would have. Once again, my personal opinion is that not that I'm in favor of opting out forever, but if I'm opting in, I'm in. Now, maybe we're out maybe next year, if we're more comfortable, but that's something that we can discuss in further. This has been a good discussion, in my opinion. So let's see what they say, and we'll discuss it at our next meeting. How's that? Okay? Yes.
I'd just like to add that for timeline, it seems like December's a long ways away, but we're now in the middle of September. And my understanding is that this to opt out becomes a local law. And to do a local law, you have to have a public hearing. So we'll need a meeting to say we're going to set a public hearing, and then we'll need that next meeting to do the public hearing. And then either decide at that meeting that we're going to pass the resolution to either adopt the local law or not, or have another meeting. So I'm just saying, timeline wise, the end of December is not as far away as we think.
May I suggest this? Let's set the public hearing at our October meeting. and have a resolution of something at our November meeting to decide.
Okay, so we're gonna set the public hearing at our October meeting to have the public hearing at our November meeting.
Does that fit?
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Okay. Yeah,
I would agree. I just don't want to emphasize that if we decide to opt in, which I know the majority right now is not in favor, we would probably want to have that public hearing, change our zoning to at least add cannabis to a similar list that we have with liquor stores, so that we have some kind of way to regulate where they show up.
Well, like I said, we can discuss this, and that's a good point. The other thing is by opting out, you buy some time, at least you can look through where you want to put the zoning. I don't want to just all of a sudden spot zone something or hurry up and get something done when we'll have more time to figure out where the best place to put this is. It doesn't have to be next to a liquor store. It can be right across from the village line if you want, or something like that. These are just things that we're going to discuss later on. So these are all good.
You're misunderstanding me, Ed. When I say we put it next to the liquor store, I mean that in our zoning. That just means wherever liquor stores would be allowed in our zoning, they would be allowed to have cannabis stores as well, not next to the liquor store, but in the same zones that we allow liquor stores with the same restrictions that we have on liquor stores.
That's fine, but it doesn't have to be that way. We'll see where it goes. That's for discussion later. Okay, so I think we've made some progress. EV charging stations, CJ?
Okay, I'm not fully sure I understand the directive, but I'll get the working group to try to provide an opinion, and we'll share some additional information for town board relative to the cannabis. Okay, all right.
I'll work with you on that, CJ.
Okay, great. So,
Who's on that committee? Who's on that subcommittee is that you? That's you, Joe? Okay, good.
yep,
Thank
and
you.
three members of the planning board as well. Moving on to the electric vehicle charging stations, came to our attention earlier this year that there was funding available from NYSERDA through the Charge Ready program, as well as NYSEG utility or Make Ready, meaning that the upgrades needed on the utility side for bringing EV charging stations to municipal locations would be essentially fully funded, and that there was a significant rebate related to EV charging stations. And so we, another small working group was formed of a couple planning board members and Joe again. Thanks for participating in that as well. And essentially, we talked to Cornell Cooperative Extension, gave us a variety of resources to check into. We met with a handful of folks who do this kind of work. We're looking for something really as turnkey as possible. Turnkey solution as possible, and so we had a couple of meetings with both Livingston Energy, their group out of somewhere near Albany, and also a group called Piezo EV, which came and did an in-person site visit with us and with let's see, we had Parks and Recreation, we had members of the planning board, we had myself, as well as Lansing Fire Department represented at that site walk. And that was really fun. We went to a bunch of locations in the town, and we scattered out what the best spots would be. And big thanks to those departments for helping us out. And so what you see in front of you are these proposals that we received. I have not been able to get a third one. I know, at least I believe that's necessary under the town's procurement policy, but it's really been pulling teeth, shall we say, to get a third quote from really anyone. But any event, I wanted to get these in front of you because there is a deadline for funding coming. Basically, the NYSERDA funding is starting to run out, and so I just wanted to make sure if this was a priority to you, that you saw that the town had been investigating it. We could get in a quote pre-application queue for the funding, so we could at least lock the funding up for now. Assuming you'd want to go through with the proposal, I can at least get moving on that pre-application, and then of course you can make a decision. So there's no pressure to make a decision on any provider tonight. This was just meant to provide you some background information, kind of mull over the proposal, send along some questions, and we'll move forward as you see fit. And all the departments or locations that would have other department involvement, of course, has been coordinated with those respective departments. So for instance, town hall ball fields, as you know, we have the Parks, Recreation and Trails Master Plan underway. We had members of the department there to advise on the location of the chargers relative to their larger plan that they have, as well as for Myers Park, because you know that's likely to be a big revitalization project coming in the next couple of years. We hope. And then, of course, the Lansing Fire Department also gave some suggestions on their locations as well, or their two preferred locations. So it was great to have them on the walk as well. Percy joined us. So with that, any questions on any of the material?
Any questions for the town board? Andrea? I'll go after.
Information on, I mean, was that an email sent to us or was that on?
I think CJ sent it to everybody last Friday.
Figures. All right.
Yeah, sorry, it's a lot of email.
I didn't know. I didn't see it in any.
I have 3 packets here, right?
Yes.
I have plug-in, I have options installation Lansing, and I have from Amanda Leonard.
Yes. I think CJ sent them last Friday afternoon, I believe.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on the email. If it helps you find it, Doug, it was Friday at 3:15.
No, I meant yesterday.
Okay.
Go ahead.
John,
I just wanted to point out that we could do some of the work in kind as opposed to having, there's a matching component for the town. But the work the town can do is digging the trenches, which is one of the more expensive parts of the project. So the town wouldn't necessarily have to lay out cash. They could just come in and do some of the work.
that's something that we can ask the highway superintendent or the department head of the rec department. If that is something.
They'd actually have to dig it and then backfill it and put back the substrate that was there prior.
Mhm.
So, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be a cost offset in that regard. I
and that
agree.
would be the easiest part for the town to actually do.
Right. I agree.
Okay. Robin, you have any questions?
Just what do you need from us to keep moving forward on this, CJ?
That's a great question. So really, there's no reason to select any of these now. I kind of just really needed to know whether you wanted to get more proposals, because I would, put a little extra legwork into seeing if we can get more proposals from other providers, say. These were recommended by Cornell Cooperative Extension, but of course we could always look further as needed. The other thing, I guess, is sort of a, maybe implicit endorsement of the proposal in general. I assume that the town board would be in favor of electric vehicle charging stations broadly, but is this something that you'd want us to pursue, because these funding incentives essentially are there for the taking, with very relatively small upfront costs to the town. So I really just kind of wanted to understand your priorities and directive.
I think it's fine with it just because it's there. I mean, what's the difference? And if we can negotiate a deal where we have very little out-of-pocket cost for that, that's fine.
Right, Joe.
First off, CJ, you tried to get 3 quotes and you haven't been able to get the third one to actually write something up.
Yeah.
So my question now turns to Guy. Is that a problem with our procurement policy if CJ's been attempting to get 3 and only 2 have actually given her quotes?
No, well, it depends on what the numbers are ultimately going to be, but sometimes you're not able to get the quotes despite due effort, and the procurement policy has, it sets forth how you document your efforts in the event you are unable to get quotes. It's a pretty common standard provision. It's in a lot of the comptroller's forms and recommendations because, for example, it's much easier to get a quote in Syracuse or Buffalo than it is in, some of the middle of the Adirondacks for some of this stuff. So yeah, if you document that you made a solid good faith effort to get the lowest price and the best value, depending upon how you're pursuing your quotes, that's sufficient.
So my next question for you, Guy, is we're talking about, like $100,000 worth of stuff, most of which is covered by grant money from New York State and stuff. How do we proceed with that? Do we have to go through a whole bidding process?
You'd have to look at the actual grant itself, but generally speaking, you'd want to know what is the town's commitment, what's the town's portion of it, because that's going to drive your procurement. But generally speaking, with these energy roadmap grant policies, you often don't have to do it. They've already screened and have lists of approved providers, and you can select from among them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't look for the best value, but you'd have to look at the terms of the specific grant, because some of them will require you to do that, and some of them have already done it for you. Further to the point, a lot of these things are already on existing bid lists. So you can, there's a Office of General Service and the State Comptroller have several piggybacking approvals. Sourcewell has quite a few of these things, and there's even some counties that are a little bit larger that have a standard bid list on this stuff. So there's a lot of options, but the first step is to understand what the grant requires, because whatever it requires, you're going to have to do regardless of what your procurement policy is.
Okay, thank you. So CJ, I think that gives you the ability to not have to go beating the bushes more because you have plenty on your plate already. And I would suggest that we move forward, but I'm just one person.
Well, let me make a comment here. Just take a moment. Move forward how? You're going to apply for a grant. Is this something that we have a subcommittee that's going to recommend one over the other, or to recommend that they move forward with a grant? Because like with these grants, it's like, okay, what is the upside? What's the downside? And we still, even if we qualify and win the grant, we don't have to accept it. But I just want to make sure, first of all, does the highway department, if they're comfortable doing part of the in-kind work, or is the rec department comfortable doing in-kind work? Also, these grants, we've applied for other grants that we're waiting for, like the Myers Park grant. We went through that procedure. Simply want to make what the pluses are, what the minuses are going forward. And, deadlines are wonderful, but once again, are we rushing towards this because of the deadline? Or I understand the money's there. Will they be available next year? When is the deadline? Is the deadline at the end of the year? We have to hurry or not? These are just questions in general. I'm not at yes, I'm not at no. I want to find out forward what our commitment is time-wise and also financially on that. And I'm not asking for questions tonight, but I'm also saying moving forward, where is our timeline, where we have to be to make a decision to if we want those or not. Pat and I have been talking about this for quite a while, so it's not anything new, but the devil's in the details, how you going to get the yes. That's all I'm asking. Is to give you a little more guidance as far as, and then I'm to pick one or the other. Okay, is that a recommendation from the subcommittee to say one over the other, or is that something we throw in front of the town and tear it apart and see what the pluses are, what the minuses are? I'm feeling a little rushed.
There's a lot of research that needs to be done. We need to know that we have the electric capabilities of putting these in Myers Park and out here at the ball fields.
Okay. Yeah. So my understanding is if we put in a quote pre-application, and I would just like to back up by saying that the NYSERDA's grant application is nothing like the CFA thankfully. It's, kind of a single page grant application, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, that said, this does obviously assume a lot of site civil work to be done by either highway or parks, and of course, we defer to them on their work plan. And so my understanding is that the funding is starting to run low from this program, but if we put in a pre-application to NYSERDA for the funding for the stations, we can get the process moving with NYSEG, as they will be upgrading everything, I believe, from the poles to the panel, in terms of providing the service. At least that's my understanding. So that is a paid 100%, because the utilities essentially are required to provide municipalities the service upgrades they need to actually be able to install the EV charging stations themselves. But obviously, Parks and Highway have a significant role to play. I know they already have a lot going on, and so that's why this is in front of this board, and we can.
So one more thing, and this is the bigger concern I have, is that for you to do this, what are you going to have to sacrifice not to do? Because we're down this road for the last 2 years or so. Here comes the next concern, drop everything, do it. Here comes the next concern, drop everything, do it. Here comes the next concern, drop everything, do it. Your scope of work, your plan that you sent out, and you might as well just shred that you said, here's my detailed report here. Here comes this thing out of left field. Stop everything, let's do this. At some point, it's like, we need to finish the zoning. We need to finish we have an ag committee that has it on the post to do things. This isn't any criticism of you, CJ, because you're doing heroic work. But at some point, now we're doing this, okay, to do this research. How much time does this take off your plate when we're trying to get the other stuff done from the comp plan that was passed 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I guess, in January, and we're still waiting for that. So I'm not against any of these things, but I get concerned when something new comes in, and yeah, let's go ahead and do this, but the one who's doing it is the one in the lower left-hand corner. And how do we do that? That's my concern. We need to get some of these projects done that we've been trying to do for a while. Now people are starting to criticize us. And it's like, okay, which ones do you want done? Because we're going to need more than a week to do it. That's just my opinion.
Well, I could just briefly address the work plan issue. So this, the town did appoint me as a climate smart communities and clean energy communities coordinator about 2 years ago when the CAC was created, or not when it was created, but when it was, I don't know, members were appointed to it, shall we say. And so this has been part of the staff support for essentially the Conservation Advisory Council in kind of a roundabout sort of way. And they listed this essentially as one of their priorities. But that said, as Ed referred to the comprehensive plan, there is no directive about electric vehicle charging stations in the comprehensive plan. So this, of course, can be tabled until the board wishes to get a more detailed work plan from Highway or Parks, or from outside contractors who would do the work. That would obviously be significantly more cost to the town, but obviously, those departments both have full work plans, and we want to respect their time as well.
I'll just say the comprehensive plan does have a sustainability section that covers this kind of stuff. I think at the time it was written, electric vehicles were not seen as prevalent as they are now. So it's certainly within the scope of what the comprehensive plan talked about, even though it wasn't individually talked about.
So where do we go from here?
I'm just a little bit worried about the grant fund, the money fund. And I know all of a sudden you turn around and, oh my goodness, if we don't apply now, the grant, we can't even get in line. There's no more money left. I don't know what to do about it, because I would hate to think we didn't apply for the grant, but then in 6 months we decide, yeah, we really want to put this in, and it costs us so much money. I mean, I don't know the solution, but I'd like to see us get in line. Yeah.
I agree. I think we should go ahead and get in line for this and move forward and do the pre-approval for the grant and then see, make sure we're going to get it and see what is going to be needed to move forward. Because it sounds like it's very clearly under both the comprehensive plan and your scope of work. You were already working on, CJ, and I know we've been talking about this for a while. It doesn't feel rushed to me at all. I mean, I know you've been talking about this research and the different locations for it, and I think we should just move on to the next step.
So how much time are you going to have to dedicate to this, that you're going to have to give up something else?
Well, I'm guessing that the pre-application will probably take, I don't know, probably a couple hours to look through the information from the proposals. We would have to coordinate also with obviously parks and as well as highway department, as well as codes, because there are obviously electrical permits that would need to be pulled, and Scott will need to take a look at the specifications for the stations and make sure they could be properly installed. And site civil we'd need to have done within the next by the snow flies, so call it the next 8 weeks. I know this is a busy time for highway and parks, so perhaps that's part of the balance of the time that would need to be put in. Obviously, that's not necessarily my time, but it would be in coordinating with them, not the physical work, of course. But and then, of course, having NYSEG out. I've already been communicating with NYSEG, as you can imagine, about other matters, but also about this Make Ready program. And they have assured me that the field planners would be out pretty quickly to help with the service upgrades, as they see this as a priority from municipalities. So, I would say over the next 8 weeks, a decent chunk of time, probably around 30 hours is my guess for all that coordination.
That's almost a week, right? Dedicated to that.
Yep.
But you won't. You got stuff to do. Okay. I have no problem either way. Well, like I said, the bigger picture is the other projects are being pushed back. We talk about overlay districts. We talk about RA zone. We talk about Airbnbs. We talk about noise ordinance. We talk about, okay, what's the next thing that people are sensitized about? And it seems to fall into, okay, let's do this next. Let's do this next. I'm just concerned that your plan of action gets disrupted almost monthly because another concern comes up. And once again, if this is the priority the board wants, which is fine by me, then people who are concerned about other things, then we're going to have to tap the brakes on those, and they're going to have to understand some of these other things are going to have to wait. So if you want to go ahead with this, it sounds like you have the consensus of the board to do that. I'm very concerned we're going to burn out our ace, which is you. Even with
That's very kind.
well, this is a marathon, and even with another full-time planner, which is a huge amount of work also. And we see in your detailed report, and I'm sure those are just the highlights, and the whole page of red is all you in your department. So once again, I'm just voicing my concern. If this is the way the board wants to go, fine by me, because I'm all in favor of the charging stations. I just, like I said before, I'm just concerned about putting so much on your plate and expecting results right away when every other concern comes up also. So that's all I have to say. So have we beat that enough? Shall we move on? Okay. Which brings us to a nice segue, moratorium.
We're not going to do the Bell Station house.
That's something I need to talk about in executive session about certain concerns. Once again, moratorium is a timeline to do a moratorium, and then there also has to be an action done by the moratorium. Guy, you want to jump in on this because we haven't talked about this in a month. We've only talked about this 5 times or so, but go ahead. You want to jump in, please?
Well, no, I mean, hold on. there's really nothing I can add to the last 3 or 4 memos, presentations, summary, and training sessions I've done on this. There are risks, there are costs, and it's either you run that gauntlet and try to achieve whatever goal you want to, or you don't. Period. There's no more advice I can give you. You have received individualized advice, specific individualized legal research, the New York Planning Federation, some case law, the comptroller's output, the Kuhn Technical Series, the article from the, there was a planning article, CJ. I mean, in terms of understanding the risk and expense in the gauntlet, I think you got it. There's nothing more I need to add. It's just my take.
I understand people are putting pressure on individuals because they think this is the panacea. Do a moratorium and go from there. But like I said, council has voiced his opinion, the planner has voiced his opinion, or her opinion, excuse me. The planning board, correct me if I'm wrong, CJ, are not in favor of moratoriums, or am I mistaken? The planning board.
Well, it was relative to one particular element, which I think was the Cuga Lake Scenic Byway. Obviously, this would be an expanded geographic area, but if the town board does wish to advance this local law, then I would send it to to the planning board for comment, along with the short-term rental local law that's coming their way soon, for consideration on Monday the 27th, so that they could provide comments on the local law. So there would be at least comments coming from them as well.
Let's go in alphabetical order. Andra, do you have any comments on this?
No, I didn't get everything he said. No, I'm okay. Let me think about it.
Brown?
Oh, alphabetical by first name. Okay.
Could you repeat what Andra said? Because I didn't hear it.
I said I have to think about it. I'm not
Just-
gonna comment.
Okay, thank you.
CJ, I would find it helpful if you, because I don't have it right in front of me, if you're able to talk about, like at our last discussion, out of that came, this is the plan for when we will be changing the zoning in these sort of districts, the RA and the overlay, and what the original plan of timeline for that was and where the timeline stands now. That'll really help me to see sort of, like Guy was saying, this isn't something anybody else can answer. This is a value judgment that the board has to make. And that'll help me see where we stand with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Could I kind of give it in broad strokes? Every
Yep.
time I seem to make a timeline, it's all weird. So hang on just a moment. Just want to kind of give a little bit of the broad strokes
Right.
of this. And when I say the zoning code and land use regulations, I mean that's meant to be a header for kind of all of it, right? So it could be specific zones, it could be overlay districts, could be any amalgam of zoning changes that the town board, in conjunction with the planning board, of course, would like to see. So we have conducted an audit and assessment of conditions. I'm still actually digging up some fascinating historical information in the office. And so hopefully plan to have at least a short list of kind of low-hanging fruit that we can make changes to in short order. Then I would anticipate some public information engagement, just really reaching out to people, especially the Agriculture Committee, as well as the Conservation Advisory Council. They've already been tasked actually with scoping some of the geographic extent of the Cuga Lake Scenic Byway Overlay District that we have been talking about. There was some really careful thought put into, how to impose that overlay district on that area. There's really a lot of thought in going into that. That's based on the town's scenic resources inventory, as you know, was adopted, not too long ago. Then we would, of course, create zoning, the draft zoning, which there is some that was created, I believe, in 2018 and 2019, in cooperation with Planning Board and the Ag Committee. So a lot of that has been pretty well vetted, but there's still some significant gaps, especially in regards to an RA district separate from an agricultural district. We really want to make sure we're tuning in those definitions quite clearly, especially as I certainly envision a lot more agritourism and agritainment type of which is a real thing, in the future in the town. And so we really want to make sure that we're getting tuned in on those, especially relative to things like special events. That's one type of kind of special and kind of temporary use that can kind of go awry, which we definitely would like to examine as part of this exercise. Then review by the town board, series of public meetings, and seeker, which we'd want to do alongside the zoning. We'd kind of be noting that as we go. And of course, the county planning for review, and the county ag board will probably have some comments. They tend to have quite a bit of comments when a right to farm community changes agricultural zoning. And then, so that would be it. So, the timeline of approximately 12 to 18 months is somewhat ambitious, but certainly can be done, especially now that we have help with development review. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does somewhat. And kind of what I was thinking more was, I think when we last spoke about a moratorium, we said, let's not spend our energy on the moratorium, let's spend our energy in getting these updates done quickly, and then we don't even have to do the moratorium. And I'm seeing that things are moving really thoughtfully, but not necessarily as quickly as we were originally hoping. So that's why this idea of the moratorium is coming up again. And that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, Doug? Unless you have any more comments, Bronwyn, we'll go to Doug.
Not at the moment, no.
All right, Doug.
I don't like the moratorium. Sorry. Don't agree with it.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I got.
Okay, Joe?
I kind of feel strongly with Bronwyn's last comment, which is we're seeing a lot of development pressure. We're way behind in the amount of work we need to do to catch our zoning up with the comprehensive plans, recommendations and stuff. And, I will add to the B1, not only do we have a comprehensive plan, but we've got some studies to figure out exactly how that area ought to be developed. And I would like to pause the large scale development until we've had a chance to catch our zoning up a little bit with our comprehensive plan and with the studies we've been doing. Because if we don't, if people are watching as how this is all developing, I expect that we'll see a increase in the number of people who are hoping to get their plan in just before we change all the zoning and kind of undermine a thoughtful planning process. And I think by pausing the development at this stage, we can do the thoughtful planning process with community engagement and not have to worry about somebody putting a development in that they have a right to do right now that would undo a lot of the planning that we've been putting forward.
Okay. It's been 3.5 years since we passed the comprehensive plan. And a lot of these zoning changes for other municipalities get done in 6 months to a year, they're all tweaked. And I understand that we haven't done the comprehensive plan for a while, so that's why there's a time delay. But the reality is that this is not going to get done in 12 to 18 months. The reality is it's going to be probably 2 years before we get this done, especially with public engagement and everything else along those lines. Can we do a moratorium for 2 years? And do you want to put in a business district a moratorium for 2 years? And a B1, we have a industrial development area to encourage. I'm against the B1, being a moratorium. You're talking about the RA zone. Once again, as I stated earlier, we get distracted by the next crisis. And now because this is showing up, we have to do this. I mean, 3 months ago it was a scenic byway. And then it was the RA zone. And now we're doing charging stations. Okay, I mean, we're trying to do all these things. My concern though is that the moratorium, you have a time limit and you need to get something done in that time limit. And I'm just concerned that we're gonna make the town vulnerable because everyone says, oh, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And next thing you know, next crisis comes up. CJ, can you do this for us now? I don't know if she has enough time to do that because that's not the only thing she's doing. So I'm not in favor of a moratorium either. I just think we just need to get the work done on that. And we should have got the work done 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever. And it's not any criticism to her. And we've added another planner. And guess what? They're swamped. So anyways, personal opinion is that this is very thin ice we're on if we're going to go down a moratorium lane on this. I don't know if we can get this done. So Guy, I need some guidance here. Can we extend a moratorium another year, another year, another year? Or is it a certain amount of time we are only allowed before all of a sudden we get hit with a lawsuit or something else?
Well, as I've said before, there is an inverse relationship between the length of a moratorium and its validity. So the validity of a moratorium turns on the underlying complexity of what it is you're trying to do and what amount of genuine due diligence strides you have made during the entirety of the period of the moratorium to implement whatever goal is identified by the moratorium. So there are cases where moratoriums have survived over 2 years. There's even a case where one went over 4. Generally speaking, you start to be at risk in a year, and at 2 years, usually you're done. But it depends on what you're talking about. Here, we're not talking about a wholesale zoning change. You're just talking about isolated projects. And so, the question with a moratorium is always that cost, risk, and balance. And I think Bronwyn said it very well. So the question of a moratorium, they're risky, they have limits, they are not a panacea, they are not a one size fits all. But if you're going to say, geez, it's been 3.5 years, the more poignant question might necessarily be, what has stopped it from getting done in the 3.5 years? Not why wasn't it done in the 3.5 years? Because certainly, as you notice, other communities are able to do this. What is it that they're doing differently? And Ed, you've made a point out of saying you have a phrase that you've used at several recent meetings called shiny baubles. And the town has been chasing a lot of distractions and it hasn't been able to concentrate its effort at its goal. Would a moratorium help that concentration or detract from it? I don't know. That's something the board should weigh and determine. But at the end of the day, as much risk and as many limitations as a moratorium does present, it is also a strong tool, and sometimes it is the correct tool for the job. So you got to sort of look at all sides of it and determine what is the underlying risk. There are certainly a lot of communities that have, created far more harm than good by a moratorium. But there are communities that have achieved some good with them. So in order to really be valid, the moratorium has to be targeted at the specific harm or issue that you're looking at. There should be some sort of exigent issue or emergency, maintaining the status quo in land use while you undertake some overall resource prioritization or regulation is a perfectly valid basis for a land use moratorium. But are you at the point at which you are actually going to materially put regulations in place within 12 to 18 months? If the answer is don't know, but we can try, then weigh the costs and risk and decide which way to go. As long as you're making really solid progress and you're not suspending your own residents' property rights for an extraordinary amount of time, i.e. over 2 years, they can be sustained. It's just, again, it's a question of what are the costs.
Rowan?
I'd like to add, as we think about the costs, it's not risk-free versus the risks of a moratorium. There are risks to not
Yeah.
doing a moratorium too. And
It's a
so
balance.
we need to balance those, and we need to acknowledge and examine what the risks of not doing moratorium would be, because there are risks to doing the moratorium, and I feel like we've really explored those pretty thoroughly. But if we're looking at that versus, well, then there's no risk, then we're not looking at the whole picture.
Brown, what are the risks of not doing a moratorium then? Because that seems to be the other side of the scale.
Right. I see the risks of not doing a moratorium as ending up with a town that doesn't follow what the residents want and what the comprehensive plan has laid out. And kind of, I'm trying to think of a nicer way to say this, but throwing away all of the work that's been done towards that, all of the work by the committees that brought us to the comprehensive plan, this amazing document that the Conservation Advisory Council gave us with the view sheds and all of their information, and to end up ignoring that essentially if we don't do a moratorium, so we can get ahead of what's happening. And I think there's value in putting ourselves on a timeline. I think that I've been at this, for what, almost 2 years now, and wanting to move forward on this and feeling, I think if we're on a timeline, that's when you write the paper in college when it's due tomorrow. So I think putting us on a timeline has a value in and of itself also.
Okay, where do we go from here? Because let me tell you, if we move forward with this, the first thing it does is going to have to go in front of the planning board. And that takes away from the work from someone doing something else. Right? Now we're in the same situation where we've got a planner. Now we've got the planning board planner to do this, right? They want to do it. I'm just vocalizing. I'll give you a chance to respond. I'm not at no, I'm not at yes. I'm just weighing the timeline and the possibilities for this. If you're talking about the RA zone where you're concerned about that, I think to do the whole thing is a huge project and probably is too time. In fact, I'm considering if it's a year, that's one thing. If you're talking 18 months, 2 years, I don't know. Maybe we need to chop this up and do pieces at a time. If you're talking about the RA zone, because you already have the ag zone proposed, that might be something to be accelerated. I'm not in favor of a B1 cessation because, quite frankly, I see that as a reaction to the dandy mini mart. I see that as that. And we want our businesses in this area. We have a B1 already, as far as that goes. And we already agreed with the IDA and everything else. That's what should be there. I am concerned about, first of all, doing the RA. We do the RA with the ag is already there and accelerate that process. I would be in favor of that for a year. Then we can do the scenic byway for a year if you want to do that. But we got to get something done. I mean, all these things are great, except at some point the realities come crashing through the roof. And next you know, Guy's going to be in court. Then as Guy would say, once you're in court, everyone loses. So having said that, if you want to pursue this, CJ, this is my recommendation to do the RA zone because the ag zone has already been proposed to the planning board. Let's push hard on that and get that done. Maybe we sleep on this and talk about it later. I don't know. I mean, that's just my recommendation to do something obtainable within a year.
Okay, yeah, I think that something is obtainable. I think maybe I would like to revise my budget slightly and put in some consulting lines because, well, you'll see the department work plan for 2022 coming to you soon, both for myself and John. And, we're supporting a lot of town functions and a lot of town committees. And as such, and we try to provide a high level of service to them. But I think we're going to really need to pull in some outside help here to get this done sooner rather than later. And ironically, we both have a lot of experience doing ag zoning, so I think we're going to have you've got a good backbone to work with, but I think we're going to also need some consulting help here, especially for the public outreach, because making changes to this area of town means being very sensitive to both the concerns of the planning board as well as the agricultural and farmland protection committee. We need them front and center, and we're going to need to work around their schedule. And so if we're going to accelerate but work around their schedule, that's that's a,
So the ag committee's already made the recommendations, I believe, for the ag zone. And it's problematic when you can't find them for 6 months of the year because they're out earning a living, if not more. I mean, usually we get hold of them in October, November. And then it's only there until maybe March. But I think they've already made their recommendations, if I'm not mistaken. And can we just move forward with the ones they've already made? And then send it to the planning board for their recommendations, then you send it to the town board through public hearings and everything else and move it forward.
What I don't understand is the role of the planning board in the moratorium. If enough board members want a moratorium in the RA, and we think we want it 12 to 18 months, then does that get presented to the planning board and they make the recommendation and we weigh what they say, we finally vote on it? Is that the way it goes?
Yeah, Bram, that's a great question, Honor. So as I read section 27057 in the town zoning, which is a subsection of authority, essentially, there's a section called referrals, and if a proposed amendment to zoning is made other than by the planning board, then that amendment has to be referred to planning board. Now I defer to council of whether he would consider a moratorium actually to be an actual amendment. So that's kind of a parsing or semantics question, but he could give the final answer on that.
Well, clearly a moratorium is not an amendment on zoning, but how that has been historically interpreted and applied in this town and in most other towns and villages is that it is a resource allocation, land use decision. And if nothing else, it's common courtesy to get the expertise and input from your own planning board because they're the ones that are going to be looking at most of this. You're also going to have to decide what board or agency will review a waiver request under a moratorium. So, usually it can be anyone, but usually it's either the town board or the ZBA. But it is, you usually do not pick a planning board because you don't want them in a situation where they have taken a strong position for or against a moratorium, and then the applicant comes in with their application, they've already taken a position against it. It's a tough conflict situation to put them in. But in terms of overall planning advice and input and the extent to which a moratorium is required, what its scope should be, I think you almost have to get their input. So I don't think it's mandated other than by common sense and simple courtesy. They are your planning board.
I agree with both Joe and Bronwyn. I'd like to do this and get going if we want a moratorium, because otherwise we just talk about it. We don't actually get to the next step. And that really bothers me because we've been talking about it and talking about it. And I've been on the board a lot of years, and it would be nice to actually say, we did it. But also, I think we do need this period in order to really think about what we want to do for the RA. I agree with Ed on the business. I think the business zoning should just stay that way. So that's my opinion.
So the next step, I mean, I don't want to jump over the planning board, but then again, I don't want to have the planning board look at this for the next 6 months either.
No.
I mean, Here we go again, right now, this is the priority. Okay, which is fine. I have no problem doing this and give it a year, Okay, RA, here's the ag already proposed, it's giddy up time. And do this. Now, there's other stuff, I mean, you look at the stuff on their plate, I mean, it's not like they're sitting around looking for something to do. They're busy. But on the other hand, once we go down this road, we got a year. And the clock ticks. Now, if we're real close and we extend it another 6 months, I think that's defendable if we're almost there. If we're at the point where we're having for instance, we have to set the public hearing for it and everything, and we're over the 12 months, I think that's defendable. Correct me if I'm wrong, Guy, because I'm not the one, if we have to go down that road, you're going to be the one that has to defend us. But I think we'll be close if we make progress and say, okay, here's a year, let's move forward on this and see where we are. But on the other hand, to get the planning board's input quickly as far as what their options are, because they've been going through the schedules, they've been going through the stuff already in the zoning, just a matter of going to the RA, and here is the stuff for them to look at what the ag committee recommends. Let's move forward on that decision and see where it goes quickly. So I don't know what the timetable is, if they get back to us and we start this in January. I simply don't know. I mean, I'm open-minded to it. I'm just concerned about the feasibility of completing this task within a reasonable time period.
Just a point of clarification, Ed, when you say this, do you mean the moratorium or the changing of the RA zoning?
Well, what I'm talking about is the actual result.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Okay, the actual scope of work that we will do, and at the end of the day, we have accomplished something. My understanding is, and I'll get you a minute, Joe. My understanding is that this moratorium, you have to show some results at the end. And if you say, well, we're almost there, we need another year. Well, now we're going into, according to Guy, we're going into an area now where it might be a little bit more touchy. Okay, am I wrong, CJ, or?
No, you're not wrong. That's why I'm shaking my head. It's really wouldn't be wise to be extending it.
Okay. Joe, you make a comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments. First off, I want to point out that when we were finishing the comprehensive plan, we had a half-time planner trying to do all the work that we now have 2 people working on. And so circumstances have changed quite a bit since then. And I think we're actually in a position now where we could accomplish it, where when we just had a half-time planning department, there was no way we were going to accomplish this with any kind of speed. Guy, I've got a question about notice and stuff, because I would really like to put a fire under all of us, including the town board, but the planning board as well. If we were to set a public hearing for a moratorium at our October meeting, and the planning board met and made some adjustments to the draft that you put together at their October meeting, which is the second Monday of the month, and I forget what day that is. Would that be plenty of notice for the public to be able to review whatever happened, or would we have to push it to a later date? How would that work?
Okay, so the planning board would basically consult and advise. If they made a recommendation, you could accept it or reject it. And certainly you're not having you would, I mean, it's a minor technicality, but the public hearing would be on the local law itself. And so if you want the planning board to review and comment by a specific date, then just make that request. And if they make changes or recommendations, in terms of how that all times out, the final version that you're going to consider needs to be in the hands of all of the board members and the town clerk 7 days exclusive of Sunday before it is adopted. It needs to be in its near final form at least 5 days before the public hearing, so the public has the time to look at it. Realistically speaking, that's the requirement of the municipal home rule law. 5 days is the minimum. It would probably be wiser to give more time than that, because there's a lot of levels to something like this. But you do what you have to do. If after the public hearing, you make any material changes in the law, and that there's a gray line there, but if you're changing dates or numbers or just basic elements or moving stuff around or adding de minimis type stuff, that's not going to do it. But if you actually change the standards, the procedures, something significant, then you must go back to public hearing again. So those are the timelines. It's 5 days notice of the public hearing. The local law has to be in that. It has to be available for those 5 days. That doesn't have to be the version you adopt. The final version must be in the hands of all the board members of the clerk and the clerk. 7 days exclusive of Sundays before adoption. You do have the option of making a declaration that's an emergency and cutting down that 7-day rule, but here you wouldn't need it. And then again, if you make any material changes, you'd have to renotice the public hearing and go through the whole process again. The comptroller's office has a poll publication on how to adopt local laws, but the procedure is pretty succinctly set out in Municipal Home Rule Law Section 20. So you have more than enough time to, let's say, adopt something in December that will basically freeze everything in the calendar year 2022, if that's what you elect.
So you could set the public hearing in November and put the moratorium in place starting in January 1st, 2022.
Yeah, you could put it in place immediately. I mean, a lot of local laws make the mistake of saying this local law shall become effective on filing. Well, you're not, yeah, the municipal home rule law says you have to file a local law, but that's ministerial. If you forget to file it, it doesn't mean it's invalid. Generally speaking, there are very few local laws that actually have specific filing requirements. You would pick a date by which you would make it effective, and normally a moratoria is responding to an exigent emergency of some sort, so they go into effect immediately. If you're trying to stop something from changing, you wouldn't put the moratorium in effect next June.
I feel comfortable with giving the planning board enough time in October, but come November, we'll set the public hearing and move forward. Now you're saying no, CJ? Am I
I
wrong
think
with this?
that's, no, I think it'd be a little too late. And there's a couple of reasons there. The planning board, I would ideally want to circulate this to them tomorrow along with county planning. Because county planning needs to provide a 239 response that you'd be considering in October. And then the planning board would be considering, they'd have the document for at least 7 business days before they met on the 27th. And that's their last meeting until late October, because the second Monday in October is a federal holiday. And so they will not be having a meeting. So
Okay.
the timeline, yeah. So.
What is
Yeah.
your time? Okay, CJ, you've got the helm. What do you recommend for this timetable then? Before I can set a public hearing?
If you want a moratorium, this is an exigent condition, and it needs to be set now for Wednesday, October 20th. And I would need to refer to county planning tomorrow morning. I refer to local neighbors tomorrow morning. I'll have to work with the clerks because we'll have to do referrals under the GML 239 NN nice neighbor deal, because this will affect properties that are just immediately adjacent to the town boundaries. And then the planning board will need time to review it and send back comments as well. So I really need to know whether this is something that you want to do. And if so, you need to set a public hearing for October 20th.
So is October 20th too soon, in your opinion, for the public hearing?
That's the timeline she sent us in the email. And I'm inclined to follow your wisdom, CJ, in the timeline of this and how we should move forward, which does, you said, set the public hearing for Wednesday, October 20th.
I think what I'm trying to say is, if the town board sees this as, imminent, that this is a threat, I am going to act on that, what you see as a threat, and I'm going to move that forward. The fastest that I can see is a month. So
I will move that we move forward on a moratorium and set a public hearing date for our October meeting.
Do we need a resolution to do that?
Yeah, you need a resolution, it's not a motion, Joe.
Well, do we need any?
Guy, what's your opinion on this?
In respect of what, whether you want to make a motion or a resolution?
I mean, it has to be a resolution, correct?
No. You don't technically even need a motion or resolution to schedule a public hearing. You just schedule it. But if you'd like to schedule a public hearing, you can just make a motion, set forth the date and time of the public hearing and what it is you're considering. And for lack of a better term, pray that you actually have a document prepared and ready by then.
And if you don't,
Then there's no point in having a public hearing. You'd have to adjourn it to another time or reset it. The nice thing is you don't have to worry about seeker. At least for this type of moratorium. There are other moratoria that are subject to seeker, but this is not.
well, we've already talked about this 5 times. So let's set the public hearing then for our October 20th meeting. That's the right date, I believe.
Mhm. Yep.
Calendar. At 6:35, I guess, is that when we normally do these?
Over 20th, yes, is the next time.
Yep.
20th.
October 20th at 6:35. We'll have a public hearing on.
What's the actual title of the public hearing? Do we know
Well, it could be temporary moratorium on certain land use development and zoning reviews and approvals for rural agricultural zone and town Lansing. Probably this one right here. If you want to hand, I can give that to you.
that? That's right, temporary moratorium on certain land for,
Yep.
just start with the temporary for the rest of the thing,
Yep.
okay?
Is that okay, everybody?
Does that language work for Guy?
All the way up to the period of 1 year, correct?
Yes, period of 1 year.
Yeah, it's fine because the scope of the public hearing is going to be defined by the scope of whatever the moratorium is finally set at. Right now, it's a draft and it hasn't been geared towards RA, B1, L1, whatever. So there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can prohibit certain type of applications from being reviewed. You can prohibit certain types of activities in certain zones. I'm not sure that's been really weighed out. But you know, if you think you can get that done and pick the right type of moratorium and make sure you set the balance between the suspension of owners' property rights and the goals of the community, have the right safety valve in it for people who suffer hardships, then if you think you can do that in a month, then yeah, you're fine. That's good.
Well, is that realistically possible in a month, guy, legally?
Yeah, you already have a draft. It's the policy that needs to be set. It's not the drafting and the public hearings that are going to take the time.
Well, let's have a teachable moment. All right. So do I need a second on this then?
I second it.
All right.
So who made the motion? Joe?
Joe,
Okay, so, and then Andrew's the first one, Andrew's the second. And the motion, as I understand it, is going to be set a public hearing for October 20th at 6:35 PM for, the right piece of paper. Temporary moratorium on certain land use development, zoning reviews and approvals in the rural agricultural zone of the town of Lansing for a period of 1 year. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Do we need more discussion?
I think we beat this horse to death 5 times, so.
Okay. And Andrew Benson,
yes,
Doug Day,
You're muted, Doug.
It's just a public hearing, right?
Yes.
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 Ron Losi,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes, okay. All right, we have executive session stuff to do. Does anyone want to take a 5-minute break?
Well, wait, you can't just do that. You gotta, why you're going to executive session and all that stuff.
I'm looking
Who,
for-
if anybody is going to be included in the executive session?
Before we get to the, while we're going.
Hang on a second, one question at a time. CJ and Guy will be also, everybody on the Hollywood Squares. Patrick, you can go. I just need to turn the button off, that's it. This button.
Do you want to say what you're
Yeah,
going?
you can't.
You can't shut it off yet.
I'm just getting that organized here about who, first of all, I got 3 questions at once. I feel like I'm a planner. Do this first, do this first, do this first. Well, welcome to Lansing. So the first thing is that you don't need to be here.
Thank God.
So I just need to turn off the button here, right? Do I do anything over there? Where's the CJ?
That'll all be CJ.
Okay,
I'll
Now
shut
the
off
thing-
the election.
that needs to be there.
I do or do not?
I don't think, well, yes, you do need to be here.
Lucky you.
This is about employee safety. Is it on here?
No.
Employee safety.
Employee safety.
Is it a specific employee person?
It's not employee, it's, well, it's a
Oh.
general employee safety.
Why is it executive?
I don't want to discuss this openly, that's why, and I'm trying to be executive session about
Okay.
it.
Disciplinary reasoning.
I don't want to talk about this publicly, so I guess we have no executive session tonight then.
It doesn't fit into any category?
No, evidently not. I guess there's a stretch here, unless Joe, you got a new card. It's the last one you gave me
Is it
2 years ago.
legal advice?
Legal advice would be nice, but they always give specifics that, don't they?
You can go into closed session for advice of counsel.
There's one which is the proposed acquisition, sale, lease of real property, which we need to talk about. That we can go to executive session for. We're also going to talk about information relating to a current or future investigation. We talk about that also. So you want to do one at a time, in and out?
We'll just go in and do both of them.
Okay.
So the one about proposed acquisition, sale, lease of real property when publicity might affect value,
Yep.
is that one? So that one, and which was the other one you said?
Ongoing investigation. Information relating to current, future investigation, prosecution of a criminal offense. It's a stretch.
Ed?
Yes.
I'm looking at our agenda and we had Bell Station Council under our work session. Did we skip over that for a reason?
Well, that's what I was concerned about also, about litigation for that one.
So you want that one here too?
Yep.
Well, is that the,
If it doesn't follow that criteria, then I can just close the meeting now and just walk away. But we need to talk about sale of land or purchase of land. That one we do need to talk about.
so you're just talking about one thing now instead of two? What happened to the current investigation part?
No, we'll do that later.
If you list it and you don't talk about it, is that a big deal? As long as you.
Probably
it's a
not,
one
probably
category.
not.
Well, I guess the last thing we should talk about before we go to the executive session then is, has there been a recommendation from Guy and CJ pertaining to the last thing on the agenda, which is the Bell Station Council? We have a recommendation in front of the board on who we should consider? Or is that still pending? This is a CJ and a Guy question. We're still pending, we can move on.
Well, I have the names of a couple people who could serve as either special counsel or consultants, but I'm not sure I fully understand what the scope of what the
Well,
town
this
board
was-
is looking for.
The charge was, our last meeting was for the two of you to come up with a recommendation for the town board for someone that would have the specific expertise into the council for the town as the Bell Station land is considered to be sold. If I'm not mistaken. And if you don't have a recommendation yet, we can revisit this at our next meeting. It looks like, should we wait till our next meeting? You can give us a recommendation on who you think we should consider.
I guess I'd be curious about how the town board would want that recommendation and what it would be based on. I think maybe that's where I'm a little fuzzy. This is obviously a bit out of my wheelhouse and not
I mean, in fact,
attorneys.
we asked for an environmental counsel for the rod and gun situation. It was recommended a certain person. And following the same template, is that you have a certain person in mind that you would recommend to the town board to hire as a consultant in case there is a need for that counsel's expertise. Guy, were you gonna say something? I may have interrupted you.
Well, I haven't talked to either candidate, and in order to evaluate any candidate, I guess I'd sort of be looking for what is the town board's goal and what are the strategies to get there. I'm also curious as to relative to perhaps diving off the high board into shallow water and expending thousands or tens of thousands on public service commission proceedings, research, draftings, briefs, lobbying, whatever it is that you plan to do, given that the town is not the agency that has for a decade been pursuing, acquiring, or preserving this land. It actually is two other agencies. I'm trying to get a handle on how did the town end up on the vanguard in the lead on this issue, because we don't have the ability to acquire it right now. And what is the actual ultimate plan for disposition of the property? Is it just stop the sale no matter what, or is there some ultimate or penultimate goal that's being sought? And how much resources does the town want to allocate to this? Because
this was a discussion from our last meeting, and my understanding was the board was drifting into this area, but evidently if we had no dog in the fight, then I guess we don't need counsel. We'll just see how it plays out. And that's fine. I don't mind. You know, I hate wasting money, especially if counsel's not there. That's fine with us. We'll just sit back and whatever happens, happens. That's fine with us because it's not our land.
I'm just asking, what goal is it the town board wants to achieve? Does it want to have someone who can intervene and work the system to try to have our letter achieve political traction and have them delay the auction to consider a sale to the DEC or some other disposition? Or are we gonna, put a hatchet in one hand and a sword in the other and go to the Public Service Commission and take on the world and stop this? Those two goals are, to a certain extent, mutually exclusive.
Well, it doesn't involve
You can't
us.
with one hand offer cooperation and the other hand offer a sword. So understanding what you want to do and what your strategy is to get from point A to point B would strongly influence even the question of whether you need an attorney or a consultant. But the last meeting, as I understood it, was to approve a letter and to get advice from someone that would be in a position to advise you on Public Service Commission issues. At this point, there's nothing pending in the Public Service Commission. So I'm still trying to figure out exactly where the town is going with this. Is it just to stop the sale? Is that the goal?
Well, my understanding was that we're hoping that there would be the best practices and hopefully that this price would be close enough to the Big Lakes Land Trust and all the parties involved that it would have turned out the way we were negotiating with all the parties involved. Now, it sounds like we've been maneuvered into becoming almost like a lead agency on something that we have no desire to acquire personally, which is the town. So I guess we could just stand back and let the Big Lakes Land Trust hire their own attorney, or the power plant company hire their own attorney, or whoever. That's fine. We wrote our letter. We reached out to the elected officials. Hopefully they'll lobby for us. I have no problem with that.
I'm not saying, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do that. I just want to know what it is that the town wants to do because, or you could just play it safe and have both on standby, sign 2 contracts and utilize each as is needed, depending on how it plays out.
I don't know what their role would be for the town. That's the thing, because we don't have a lot of input.
Well, that's exactly my question. What exactly are you looking for? Because I haven't talked to either of these people and I understand the goal. I've been looking at this issue since 2012. But it's it started in 2011. In 2012 was when this first idea launched, came back in 14, came back in 17, and now it's back in 21. Okay. But what is the town's goal and what strategy does the town want to pursue to achieve that goal? And if you feel that you need an expert on Public Service Commission law to help you develop that strategy, then maybe that's as simple as your answer has to be. And we can try to figure out which of these 2 candidates is best or whether there's a third one that can also be in the mix. But at the end of the day, without knowing what your goal is and how you're planning on achieving it, obviously, if you're going to achieve it through litigation, arguing at the Public Service Commission and commencing an Article 78 action thereafter, the type of consultant you need is much different than if what you want to do is broker a deal and try to get a discussion going between whoever's going to purchase this land and the owner of the land. The town could be the purchaser as well. You could decide that if worse came to worse, you as the town would exercise your eminent domain powers. That's a whole different ball of wax. So I can certainly give my 2 cents, but I haven't talked to either candidate yet because I haven't figured out what you want. I know what the goal is. The goal is to not have a sale and to have this land go into, for lack of a better term, the public trust, either as conservation land or recreational land or state forest or something. We're 30 something acres, 20, 30 acres short of being a state forest, but you could probably get special legislation for that if you needed it or find the rest of the land. What I don't know is what is the goal here? Are you trying to engage NICEAG or are you trying to prepare for a public service hearing and filing a objection to the petition?
No, you got a comment?
Yeah, this is not the time for a sword right now. This is the time, in my opinion, to look for somebody who can tell us what strings the town has the ability to pull to push this in the direction we want, because we're all outside of our knowledge base. Should we be filing something with the governor's office? Is there a PSC thing we could be filing that would this is what I'm looking for, is someone who can tell us, who knows Albany politics, who knows the PSC, who knows NICEAG, and says, if you want to accomplish this, you guys can do, here's the pressure that you could put, here's what the town should be doing.
Okay.
Well, how's the rest of the board feel about that? I mean, so we're looking for strategy, looks like.
I would agree. I think that because we're not talking about buying it immediately or anything, but we want it to be in the public trust, for lack of a better term, like you said, Guy, that going to someone who we can say, what can we as a town do, rather than how do we make this, how do we use a sword and end this whole thing? Rather, what tools do we have as the town, not as the power company, not as Finger Lakes Land Trust?
How do you feel about
Yeah,
that?
I agree with you.
Okay. Doug?
Okay.
Still trying to figure out why we're heckling over someone else's land. But that's me.
Does
I
that
know.
help? Sorry, Doug.
No, I know why we're doing it. It's just beyond me how we're that private.
Guy,
property.
okay. Do they give you better parameters, Guy and CJ?
Yeah, I mean, it does. What you're looking for is advice on developing a strategy, not litigation counsel, for lack of a better term. If you had to look at one extreme or the other, And that was my concern, because you don't go to NICEAG with, an olive branch in one hand and a sword in the other. What message are you really sending has been my principal concern, because historically speaking, NICEAG, granted, it's gone through a few pieces of ownership since then, but their request has always been not to make a giant public scene and controversy out of this, because they don't want to deal with it that way. And that's sort of how it ended up getting pulled off the market again. And my concern is, let's say you do end up wielding the sword, and let's say theoretically you are able to pull whatever off and win at the Public Service Commission and they deny the sale. Well, then maybe the property just never gets sold. Maybe they wait 20 years and do it again. I mean, you may have delayed the problem but achieved no goal, and at what cost? Because at that point, since you've made yourself public enemy number one, they may not sell the land, but they may be darn sure who they're never going to sell it to. So I think there's a longer term strategy that would make sense to consider.
So I think we agree on what the concept is here for the expertise of the lawyer we're looking for counsel. And that sounds to be the strategy. So if those parameters are helpful to you too, perhaps you can bring a recommendation to our board at our next regular meeting in October. Yes?
Okay.
You okay with that, everybody? Recommendation at the next meeting?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. Would you want to be prepared to execute an agreement with them as well? Okay. All right.
I'd like to have an agreement, contract or something in front of us, we can discuss it.
Okay. Understood.
If possible, if time allows.
Yeah, I mean, I would also recommend that you at least have an opportunity, either individually or otherwise, to vet the candidates. Because it's like there's any number of qualified persons that could do this, and based on what their experience is and what their cost is and stuff like that, you may want an opportunity to review a curriculum vitae and maybe even engage in a bit of conversation, either one-on-one or almost like an informal interview. Come attend our meeting, let's do a Q&A, and then decide on it. But again, you don't have time to really, study every aspect and every detail. You sort of have to make a decision. So if we can get it down to 2 candidates and you guys can tell us which way you're leaning, maybe that's the way to go.
Is this something that we could ask for the Conservation Advisory about Council's advice on? Like, could they do one of the steps between now and our next meeting?
Personal opinion is that you have 2 experts right here between your planner and our attorney.
Well, I was going to point out,
Go ahead, Joe.
we have a meeting in 2 weeks. Is it possible to get something back by then, or is that too quick for you guys?
Well, who has the level of expertise to find out who has the skill set? I think it's Guy, and I think it's CJ. Nothing against the CAC. But those are whose experiences in these areas, I think, would be beneficial. And that's nothing against the CAC. But the other thing is that I once again, we did this before last month, asked them to do it. So I don't think we should change, but this is one person's opinion here. They have Guy and CJ work on this and move forward.
But what I'm hearing Guy say is that some of this is, again, a value judgment. So it's not so much the expertise. He can point us in the direction of some people, but then we need to do some vetting beyond that. So whether we do that as the town board or we ask the CAC to do that, I think the town needs to have some interaction with these folks is what I'm hearing your suggestion, Guy.
Well, I'm saying that is normal procedure when you're
Right.
when you're interviewing consultants.
Right.
Whether or not you have that time and whether or not you want to defer on a recommendation, or, because I mean, we could literally scope out and send you 6 candidates. I don't think your timeline's going to support that kind of process. But if we got it down to one consensus recommendation and you went yay or nay, or maybe 2, then you could, weigh the costs and whatever and come up with a decision. If you want to get input from some other agency or some other person, that's fine. These are the two that we've looked at so far. I haven't talked to either of them. Both came with pretty sterling recommendations and both have, experience longer than your arm. So it's really more a question of, what do you want to spend and what do you want to accomplish? And I think what Joe said is pretty much consistent with what he said last time and why he made a few changes to that resolution. That we're looking to see what our options are to open the door for others to fulfill their quest. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, then we determine, is there a plan B and is the town the one to execute it? But at the end of the day, I think the board ultimately has to make the choice. I don't think 2 weeks is difficult considering it's a relatively finite task. My limitation is that I'll only be available for one of those weeks.
Well, I personally, I would like to get moving on this if we could. So since we have a meeting in 2 weeks, I would love it if we could get a recommendation then and possibly even schedule an interview with somebody at that point.
Maybe Ron, when a compromise could be, maybe we could send you, as Guy's suggesting, maybe the CV or background of the person that we'd recommend as to meeting that broader
Perfect.
goal. And that would give you a chance to really directly vet them yourself. And then we could just have an agreement prepared and ready for you to go on the 29th. And then
Perfect,
that
yeah.
way, well, CAC, I was just thinking CAC doesn't meet till the 7th. And then, yeah. So.
Right. And I was just thinking of them because I forgot we had the meeting in 2 weeks. So I was like, well, if we want some committee or board's input, maybe they could look at it before our next town board meeting. But no, that makes perfect sense that you just send us the CV and we look over it and then maybe we can even move on it on the 29th. That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Well, CJ, why don't you and I plan on sort of doing some, some critical thinking and a few Q&A and put together a package and then talk to both of these candidates and then move it forward.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
So I'd like to take a 5-minute break and then we'll go into executive session.
Okay. So the recommendations are coming to the September 29th meeting instead of the October. I just want to be clear on what I'm putting here. Is that what the decision was?
The 29th is our working meeting. That's all it is about the budget.
Right, but that's what they were just talking about. That's when they're talking about bringing this.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
we
be
won't
an
decide-
agenda item.
We won't decide on our October meeting.
I don't know. I wasn't.
I want to add it to the 29th.
I think there's a value in getting the insight before the auction closes.
Well, the auction extends to when, CJ? It's the October 20th?
10th and 11th.
It starts on the 11th.
So it sounds like it's ending on the day of our October meeting.
We can get it done in 2 weeks and I'll put on the agenda. That's fine. The
Thank you.
29th.
Thanks.
Okay, so before you take your break, we still need to work on the executive session, what we're doing.
So the executive session,
I wrote down from before, number 3, which is the proposed
Yep, that's it.
acquisition
That's the
sale.
only
lease.
one.
That's the only one.
that's the only one.
Cross this off. Okay, so I have a motion by Ed. Do I have a second? I guess you're supposed to. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
You guys can go. Andrew and I stay. Shut that up.